Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling back to one of the most gloriously chaotic civilizations in history, ancient Rome. Not the toga party version, not the are you not entertained gladiator version. I mean the real, day in the life. You smell like goat soup and sawdust version of ancient Rome. The streets are loud, the sandals are uncomfortable, and yes, every building is somehow under construction. So before we plunge into the public bath of questionable hygiene, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and how long it took before you fell asleep. My current record is 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Beat that, if you dare. Now, dim those lights. Put a fan on for that cozy background hum. Wiggle yourself into a blanket burrito. Maybe whisper a quiet prayer to the god of comfortable pillows, and prepare your brain for the slowest collapse into slumber, via a deep dive into daily life in ancient Rome. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to wake up in a Roman insula, surrounded by your extended family, 4 chickens, and the overwhelming scent of yesterday's lentils? Did Romans really lounge around all day eating grapes? What happened if you ran out of olive oil but still needed to exfoliate your armpits with a metal stick? How did they handle hangovers without electrolytes? Did public bathrooms really have no privacy? And how long could you go without accidentally starting a philosophical debate with a guy named Marcus who hasn't bathed in a week? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in Rome. The year is 105 CE. The empire is at its peak. You're on the 3rd floor of a rickety wooden apartment that smells like smoke, sweat, and ambition. There's shouting outside. A mule cart just crashed into a bakery, and your neighbor is loudly arguing with his cat. Welcome to daily life in ancient Rome. Let's begin. Your eyes flutter open to the sweet scent of moldy straw and burning fish sauce. Congratulations. You've survived another night in a Roman insula, an apartment building so flimsy, it's basically a stack of tinderboxes held together by hope and questionable engineering. You're on the 3rd floor, which means you're poor but not too poor. Above you, people live in what might technically qualify as a cupboard. The ceiling creaks ominously, reminding you that the floor above was not constructed with modern safety standards, or really any standards at all. It's mostly wood, mud bricks, and the collective optimism of the 40 people crammed into this one building. Someone drops a clay pot above you, and you flinch. It doesn't break, but your spirit does, just a little. The room is barely big enough for your family, the family goat, and a straw mattress that's seen more centuries than your local senator. You shift, and the straw crunches beneath you, releasing a fresh puff of dust and disappointment. It's not just moldy, it's historically moldy. If you inhale too deeply, you might learn Latin via fungal osmosis. You shuffle toward the tiny window that barely opens and offers a charming view of a wall. Across the narrow alleyway is the identical window of your neighbor, who's already up and loudly hawking a loogie out onto the street below. You nod politely. He nods back. This is the Roman version of good morning. Down below, the street is already coming to life, or rather, it never stopped. Rome doesn't sleep so much as it periodically yells quieter. A vendor's shouting about turnips. Someone's singing off-key. A dog is barking at a mime. Classic Tuesday. You slip into your tunic, which doubles as sleepwear, formal wear, and emotional support cloth. There's a hole in the side, but you're pretending it's for ventilation. You step around the chamber pot, which is full because last night the public toilet was overrun by what may have been an impromptu gladiator rehearsal. Again, the walls of your insula are paper thin. You can hear everything: your neighbor's breakfast argument, someone practicing flute badly, and 2 floors up, what is either very passionate pottery making or a minor domestic dispute. It's not your business. You focus on not falling through the floorboards. You light a small oil lamp, careful not to knock it over, because the entire building is basically a box of firewood with stairs. Fires are so common here that the Romans invented an entire fire brigade, mostly so they'd have someone to blame when the place inevitably burned down. You whisper a silent prayer to Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and also apparently of structural negligence. The walls are plastered with faded frescoes, probably painted when the empire still believed in budgeting for paint. They depict pastoral scenes, or they used to. Now they mostly depict brown smudge and the outline of a former cow. Breakfast smells begin to waft up through the cracks in the floor. Garlic, lentils, and what you can only describe as burnt effort. Somewhere below, someone's cooking fish again, possibly with revenge as the main seasoning. You try not to breathe too deeply. Your youngest sibling, or possibly cousin, nobody's sure, tumbles off the mattress and immediately starts trying to catch a beetle for entertainment. You hand them a crust of bread and call it parenting, and then it hits you. This is it. Another day in the Roman Empire. No running water, no Wi-Fi, no insulation. But hey, at least the floor didn't collapse. Yet, it's time to get clean. In the most inconvenient way possible. You reach for your jar of olive oil not to eat, but to smear on your body like some kind of greasy Roman lizard. Then you grab your strigil, a curved metal scraper that doubles as both a hygiene tool and a gentle reminder that loofahs won't be invented for another 1,000 years. The oil is cold, because of course it is. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, and your apartment is about as well insulated as a breadbasket. You shiver, then begin to rub the oil into your skin like you're prepping yourself for a light sauté. The smell is fruity, slightly grassy, with hints of whatever was last stored in this amphora before someone decided it could be repurposed as a body wash dispenser. There is no soap. Soap is a barbarian concept, literally. The Romans considered it a strange Germanic custom involving animal fat and ash, which is just a polite way of saying ew. Instead, you coat yourself in oil, let the grime stick to it, and then scrape it off with a strigil. Hygiene by subtraction. Now comes the scraping. You run the strigil down your arm, and it makes a sound like someone peeling a carrot with feelings. Dead skin, dust, yesterday's sweat, the ghost of last week's fish stew, it all comes off in little greasy ribbons. It's oddly satisfying, in the same way popping bubble wrap is satisfying. If bubble wrap smelled like your uncle's armpit, you go slowly, because the strigil is not exactly ergonomic. It's made of bronze, and it has the comforting warmth of a medieval dental tool. As you reach behind your back to scrape, you realize two things. One, you are not as flexible as you thought. And two, your shoulder just made a sound that may or may not require divine intervention. You switch arms and scrape again, wondering if this is what self-care felt like before bathtubs. Probably not. Probably it felt like mild discomfort and a deep, lingering question of whether you were just exfoliating or slowly turning yourself into a salad. Downstairs, you can hear your neighbor arguing with his wife about something oil-related. Either he forgot to buy it, or he used the good stuff on his goat. In Rome, both are equally serious offenses. Back in your room, the floor is now a fine layer of exfoliated gunk and despair. You wipe your feet on a rag, which might once have been part of a senator's toga before retirement, and call it cleaning. If you're lucky, you can toss the scraped-off grime out the window into the alley, where it joins a growing pile of daily shame from other apartments. The city runs on olive oil and lowered expectations. Once you're done scraping, you feel lighter, less crusty. Your skin is soft in that slightly tacky way that makes you wonder if you missed a spot. You probably did. It's fine. No one's judging, except everyone. Rome is a deeply judgmental city, and someone out there is ranking your grooming habits as we speak. Now, time for the hair. You reach for the comb wooden, full of split teeth, and possibly older than your grandmother. Your hair is stiff with dust, tangled into a style you'll generously call tragic. As you rake the comb through your curls, you discover a small pebble. You don't know how it got there. You don't want to know. Romans cared deeply about appearance, but mostly in that please don't look poor kind of way. You don't need to look good, per se. You just need to look like you made an effort. Hence the oil. Hence the scraping. Hence the tiny dab of perfume behind the ear that smells like a combination of roses, frankincense, and whatever they use to embalm emperors. There's no deodorant. Instead, you rely on sheer willpower, strategically placed herbs, and the fact that everyone else also smells like they were pickled in goat fat. The olfactory bar is low. And frankly, that's the only thing saving you right now. Sometimes, if you're feeling particularly fancy, or if you're trying to impress a potential romantic partner who also lives in a collapsing wooden box, you'll visit the public bathhouse later in the day. There, professional oiling and scraping teams await, ready to lube you up like a festive roast and make casual conversation about chariot races while scrubbing your inner thigh. But for now, this is your morning routine. Oil, scrape, comb. Pray no one notices the beetle you just flicked off your ankle. You dab the sweat from your brow with a linen cloth that hasn't been washed since Emperor Domitian's reign and take a breath. You're clean. or Roman clean, which is to say, mildly oiled and less grimy than yesterday. You're now ready to face the day, fragrant, exfoliated, and slightly shimmering like a rotisserie chicken, which, in Rome, is as good as it gets. The Roman breakfast, orientaculum, is not what you'd call inspiring. There's no cappuccino, no pancakes, just cold bread, maybe some olives if you're lucky, and beans that taste like they've been emotionally neglected. You chew quietly while watching a rat scurry past the door. He looks disappointed too. You're seated on a creaky wooden stool that wobbles with every bite, in a room that smells vaguely of last night's fish stew and lightly fermented feet. The lighting is dim because windows are a luxury, and the tiny flicker from your oil lamp does little to brighten the mood or your beans. They're grey. Why are they grey? The bread is yesterday's, possibly the day before yesterday's. Hard enough to be classified as a weapon, but still considered edible because, in Rome, dental care is more of an afterthought. You dip the crust into a splash of watered-down wine to soften it, pretending it's some kind of rustic delicacy. It's not. It's just wet sadness. You look around at your family, all equally underwhelmed by the morning meal. Your younger brother gnaws silently on a corner of bread that might also be a fossil. Your grandmother is already halfway through a bowl of lentils with the speed and precision of someone who's been hungry since the Republic. No one speaks. Not because you're all deep in thought, but because it's too early to complain out loud. Breakfast isn't the grand social event it might be in modern life. There's no brunch culture, no Instagram-worthy omelettes, no bottomless mimosas, just calories and survival. The average Roman views breakfast the same way you might view flossing: necessary, unglamorous, and better when done quickly. And you're definitely eating on the floor. Maybe not directly on it, but close enough that your knee touches a patch of questionable moisture. The table, if you even have one, is a board balanced on two crates. There's a single clay cup for the wine, which is passed around with a level of hygiene that would make a modern doctor weep. If you're rich, breakfast might include fruit, honey, or cheese. But you're not rich. You're just trying to make it to midday without your stomach staging a rebellion. You glance at the olives in the shared bowl. They're wrinkled, bitter, and somehow dusty. You eat one anyway, because it counts as a vegetable and you've got things to do like surviving. In theory, intaculum is supposed to be quick and light. Roman doctors warned against eating too much in the morning because they believed it could make you sluggish, which is ironic, considering the breakfast itself is so bland that it could actually put you back to sleep. If you weren't already wide awake from the shouting in the alley, the smell of donkey manure, and the neighbour's child playing the pan flute at dawn, there's no such thing as coffee. The closest thing is posca, a vinegary concoction of sour wine and water, sometimes infused with herbs. It's technically drinkable, but emotionally it feels like punishment. You sniff it and feel your soul shrink. You take a sip anyway. It burns going down and tastes like regret steeped in copper. But hey, at least it's hydrating. Probably. Someone knocks over the olive bowl, and nobody even reacts. A few roll across the floor and disappear into the shadows, probably to be claimed later by either a rat or a particularly adventurous beetle. You sigh and go back to chewing your bread, which by now has absorbed exactly 0% of the wine. You think about what rich people eat. Eggs, cakes, dates, stuffed with nuts. You've seen them being carried into domus houses by servants with actual shoes. You've never tasted a date in your life, but you've decided they're probably magical. You also imagine that their beans don't taste like betrayal and wood chips. Outside, the noise of the city grows louder. The Forum is waking up. A seller down the street is already hawking stale turnips, and someone is yelling at a chicken like it owes them money. A mule cart crashes into a barrel of cabbages. Again, you wipe your mouth with your sleeve, which doubles as your napkin, towel, and occasional head covering. The bean bowl is empty now, except for a single scorched legume clinging to the side like a sad, oily limpet. You consider licking it. You do not. Breakfast is over. It was never really enjoyed, but it has been consumed, and that's good enough. Your stomach has stopped growling. Your teeth are still mostly intact. You've gotten your minimum daily requirement of salt and existential dread. You stand up, brush crumbs off your tunic, and prepare to face the day. You may not be nourished, exactly, but you are. Functional, slightly bloated, mildly irritated, perfectly Roman. You step over the rat on your way out. He doesn't even flinch. He's probably just waiting for lunch. Despite popular belief, you don't wear a toga. That's for politicians and people trying too hard. You slip into your tunica, a kind of linen sack that says, "I've given up," but in a socially acceptable way. Sandals go on last, and they provide all the arch support of a wilted lettuce leaf. The tunica is your daily uniform. It's simple, functional, and about as fashionable as a potato sack tied with string. There's no embroidery, no fancy hemline, just beige. Always beige. You once tried to dye it a vibrant red, but it came out blotchy and made you look like you'd lost a fight with a jar of pickled beets. Never again. You give it a quick shake before putting it on. Not out of habit, but necessity. Sometimes spiders move in overnight. And once, just once, you shook out a small lizard who'd apparently mistaken your sleeve for a studio apartment. He was not happy about the eviction. Pulling on the tunic is a breeze, no buttons, no zippers, no fuss. Just stick your head through the hole and let gravity do the rest. It drapes down past your knees in an unflattering yet democratic fit. Everyone looks equally average in a tunic, which is comforting in a world where your neighbor's goat owns more land than you do. If you're a woman, the daily outfit involves a stola, which is like a tunic but with more fabric and slightly more judgment. You'll also wear a pala, a shawl that doubles as a sunshade, scarf, privacy curtain, or emergency napkin depending on the situation. Putting it on involves a complicated series of wraps and tucks that somehow always ends with one shoulder exposed, as if the fabric itself has decided modesty is optional today. And if you're really poor or really lazy, you might skip the full tunic and just stay in your subligaculum, which is basically ancient Roman underwear. Think loincloth, but with delusions of grandeur. It's breathable, functional, and guarantees you'll never be invited to a dinner party. But today, you're dressing to impress, or at least to avoid being publicly mistaken for a beggar. You cinch the tunic with a rope belt, or cingulum, which gives it shape and lets you carry a pouch or dagger, just the essentials. Like keys, if keys existed yet, they don't. So mostly, it holds your knife, your coin purse, and your dignity, barely. Now for the sandals. Roman sandals are both genius and torture. On the one hand, they're light, well ventilated, and easy to repair. On the other hand, they're made from leather straps that seem personally offended by the concept of comfort. You slip your feet into them and immediately feel the familiar sensation of a blister preparing to blossom like a terrible, painful flower. The soles are thin, really thin, just enough to stop you from stepping directly onto pebbles, manure, and the eternal mystery puddles of the Roman street. But they do nothing for shock absorption. So every cobblestone feels like it's personally judging your arches. There's also the matter of fastening. Roman sandals lace up the ankle and sometimes the calf, depending on how dramatic you're feeling that morning. You do your best to tie them neatly, but halfway up your shin you get distracted and forget the pattern. You improvise. Now one leg looks like a gladiator, and the other like a drunk spider tried macrame. Fashion, of course, depends on your social class. If you were rich, and let's be honest, you're not, you might wear a fresh tunic dyed in soft saffron or elegant sea green. Maybe even one imported from Egypt or dyed with actual murex purple. The shade's so expensive it costs more than your apartment. That color is reserved for emperors, senators, and people who can afford to casually own marble furniture. As a regular citizen, you aim for clean and vaguely presentable. Bonus points if the stains are symmetrical. You give yourself a quick once-over in the polished bronze mirror shard propped on the windowsill. It's warped and slightly green, and it adds 10 years to your face. But at least you know your tunic is on the right way around. If you work outdoors, you might throw on a cloak painula if it's raining, lacerna if it's breezy, or sargum if you're pretending to be military adjacent for intimidation purposes. These cloaks are heavy, scratchy, and smell like sheep. But they also have the magical ability to make you look 10% more mysterious and 30% more unapproachable. And then there's jewelry. If you're a woman, maybe you slip on a fibula brooch, a bit of bronze around your neck, or a bangle made of something shiny and suspiciously green. If you're a man, jewelry is risky unless you're going for wealthy merchant or local magician. You settle for a simple ring iron if you're broke, silver if you've been hoarding your coin. Getting dressed in ancient Rome is more performance than pleasure. It's a careful balance between functionality and avoiding judgment from your neighbors, who are definitely watching and absolutely keeping score. But at last, you're ready. Tunic secured, sandals laced, hair wrangled, and dignity mostly intact. You step out into the street with the confidence of someone who knows they've done their best, and the faint hope that today, your sandals won't betray you by snapping halfway to the forum. You won't win any fashion contests, but you also won't be mistaken for a runaway slave or a sleepwalking senator. And in Rome, that's a victory. The moment you step outside, you're hit with a wall of sound. Merchants shouting, children screaming, someone arguing with a statue. It's a sensory overload. The streets are paved, yes, but poorly. And there's a goat traffic jam in front of the fishmonger. It smells like ambition and fermented anchovies. Rome is awake. And by awake, we mean immediately on fire with activity. There's no easing into the day. You go from groggy silence to full volume chaos in 0.6 seconds. The air is thick with the mingled aromas of garlic, donkey sweat, damp wool, overripe fruit, and something that might once have been cabbage. Or possibly a person. You try not to think about it too hard. You step into the street carefully, because the road outside your insula is less of a road and more of an obstacle course. It was paved by someone who clearly hated feet. The stones are uneven, sharp, and apparently placed in a pattern that resembles chaos theory. Each step is a gamble. Will you twist an ankle? Will your sandal be claimed by a mysterious puddle? Only the gods know. To your left, a fruit vendor is screaming about his figs so fresh they insult your wife. To your right, a man is attempting to sell what he swears is imported Egyptian perfume, but smells suspiciously like wine and mold. In the middle of the street, a group of chickens is boldly asserting dominance over a passing mule. The mule, to its credit, is handling the situation with quiet dignity and mild constipation. And then there's the goats. So many goats. No one knows who owns them. No one remembers a time before they were here. They are eternal. They're standing calmly in the middle of the road, blocking traffic, chewing thoughtfully while eyeing everyone like they're plotting something. They're the true rulers of this part of town. Someone tries to shoo them away with a broom, which just makes one of them climb onto a barrel and stare harder. You make the wise decision to walk around them. You don't need that kind of trouble before breakfast has even digested. A water seller passes by carrying 2 sloshing amphorae on a wooden yoke, and you flatten yourself against a wall to avoid getting soaked. He nods, mutters something about Neptune being angry this week, and disappears into the crowd. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you nod back like you're in full agreement. It's safer that way. Up ahead, 2 men are mid-argument in front of the baker's stall. Something about the size of a loaf and a wife's honor. It's escalating quickly. One of them dramatically waves a baguette, which is less threatening than he probably intends, but very aerodynamic. The baker, unfazed, continues to pull more loaves out of his oven, sweat dripping from his forehead onto the bread. You mentally update your plans for lunch. Meanwhile, someone somewhere is playing a panpipe, which would be charming if they weren't playing the same 5 notes over and over again like a flute-themed curse. You start to walk faster, but that just means you bump into a teenage boy juggling lemons. He gives you a dirty look like you ruined his act. You mutter an apology and receive a squirt of lemon juice to the tunic as a parting gift. There's no sidewalk. The road is everyone's turf, humans, animals, carts, extremely loud vegetables, and the occasional man who's very passionately reciting epic poetry to no one. You try to remember the last time you saw a cart with working wheels. It's been a while. Most of them are held together with twine, spit, and sheer willpower. As you pass the butcher's stall, you're greeted by the sight of several animal carcasses dangling from hooks. Flies are having a party. The butcher waves a cleaver in greeting. You wave back and immediately regret looking too closely at whatever's dripping onto the cobblestones. There's a brief moment of calm when you turn down a narrow side alley just long enough for a cat to sprint across your path, chased by a smaller child wielding a stick and a questionable moral compass. The cat wins. Back in the main street, a man in a toga, so definitely rich or trying to impress someone, is being carried in a litter by 4 very sweaty slaves. You step aside as the procession goes by, trying not to look too envious of someone who gets to travel while reclined and unbothered by chicken-related delays. At the corner near the forum, a group of street performers has gathered. One's doing a comedy routine in very bad Latin, another is swallowing fire, and a third is standing still, pretending to be a statue. Ironically, the real statue nearby is in worse condition. Someone has drawn eyebrows on it, and no one seems inclined to fix them. All the while, the shouting continues. Bread prices, fish weights, lost dogs, found children. Someone is claiming to have invented a better type of sandal. Someone else is disputing that, loudly and with footnotes. It's like Twitter, but in real life, and with more accidental donkey collisions. You keep walking, weaving through the madness, nostrils flaring against the alternating waves of incense, fish, and regret. You pass a man selling scrolls, a woman selling flowers, and someone offering authentic relics that look suspiciously like bits of old brick. Eventually, you reach your destination, probably the forum, or the market, or just somewhere slightly less goat-congested. You exhale. You made it. You are not injured. You are not covered in too much mystery juice. You have successfully navigated the Roman street scene. You deserve a medal. Or at least a nap. You're not a senator. You're not even a baker. You're probably a laborer, a shopkeeper, or if things have really gone south, a fuller someone who washes clothes with urine. Yes, urine. You try not to think about it too much while wringing out yet another toga stained with suspicious fluids. And it's not just any urine. It's collected from pots left out in the street, where generous citizens contribute to the public pee fund. The ammonia in it is great for whitening tunics and dissolving your sense of dignity. You slosh it around in a tub with some soapwort and give it a good stomp barefoot, naturally like you're crushing grapes, except instead of wine, you're producing disappointment and foot rash. But hey, it's honest work. If you're not a fuller, maybe you've snagged a spot on a construction crew. Rome is always under construction. Always. You show up with your tools, which include a shovel, a pickaxe, and possibly your own coffin, just in case. And you spend your days hauling bricks, stacking stones, and yelling at co-workers who believe that straight lines are just a suggestion. You work long hours in the sun, dodging falling tiles and runaway donkeys. If the engineer overseeing the project has actual training, congratulations, you're on the one job site in Rome that isn't shaped like a question mark. More likely, he's the cousin of a senator and thinks mortar is just fancy mayonnaise. Or maybe you've got a little stall in the forum. You sell olives, or sandals, or hand-carved figurines of Jupiter doing slightly inappropriate things. You set up your wares each morning, swat away pigeons, and try to smile at customers who think haggling is a contact sport. A woman tries to pay you with a fish. You consider it, then there's the barbershop. You could be the guy scraping faces with a razor that's been sharpened on a rock and passed down since the reign of Augustus. Your customers sit on rickety stools while you shave their stubble and listen to their deeply personal problems. You're part barber, part therapist, part unofficial town crier, and all the while, you're dodging lice like they owe you money. If you're a woman, job options are even more limited. You might be spinning wool, selling herbs, working as a wet nurse. Or if you're bold and the neighbours are nosy, operating a popina, a small tavern serving wine and lentils to cranky labourers and suspicious poets. You're also doing all of this while managing the household, raising a parade of children, and politely pretending not to notice your husband is having a midlife crisis in the form of philosophical scrolls. Some people work in public bathhouses. You could be the guy who keeps the fires going under the hypercourse system, sweating profusely while crawling around under the floors like a soot-covered mole. Or you're the oil boy, rubbing olive oil onto wealthy patrons who think tipping means nodding vaguely in your direction. And then, of course, there's the life of the street vendor. You walk the roads shouting about your wares, hot chestnuts, fresh eels, mystery stew, and hope someone buys something before you pass out from dehydration. One guy down the street makes a decent living selling fried dormice on a stick. You tried one once. It tasted like guilt. If you're a scribe, you sit all day copying documents for clients who can't read, which is ironically most of them. You dip your quill into ink made from soot and vinegar, and carefully transcribe legal contracts, love letters, or very creative lawsuits involving goats, property lines, and dishonor. Then there's religious work. Maybe you're a minor priest in a minor temple to a minor god no one really prays to anymore. Your job involves lighting incense, sacrificing the occasional pigeon, and reassuring people that their terrible harvest is not, in fact, a curse from Pluto probably. One of the worst gigs, the public latrine cleaner. You walk into a communal bathroom that seats 20, armed with a broom, a bucket, and the quiet resignation of a man who once had dreams. You fish communal sponges out of jars, mop up what cannot be unseen, and pray to every god, including ones you made up on the spot for a better tomorrow. And of course, let's not forget entertainment. If you're lucky, you're part of a traveling theatre troupe, performing in sandals on rickety stages for crowds that are half drunk and fully judgmental. If you're less lucky, you're a street musician playing the same five-note tune on a reed pipe for 3 hours straight, hoping someone throws you a coin and not a turnip. At the very bottom of the barrel, you've got the poor souls who end up in the arena. Not the ones with swords and dramatic speeches, the ones dressed as wild animals, or worse, props. If you're playing Tree Hash 3 in a historical reenactment and your job is to get knocked over by a chariot, you probably took a wrong turn somewhere in your career. But no matter the job, the hours are long, the pay is low, and workplace safety is just a twinkle in Mars's angry eye. There's no vacation, no dental, no weekend brunch, just toil, grime, and the ever-present risk of accidentally angering your boss, your neighbor, or a nearby deity with very specific dietary requirements. Still, somehow, you get up every day and do it all again, because that's what life is like for the average Roman. Gritty, exhausting, often absurd, but just functional enough to keep you hoping tomorrow might come with fewer goats and more bread. Probably not. But you can dream. The Forum is the beating heart of Rome, and by beating heart, I mean a political circus wrapped in a marketplace, wrapped in a guy yelling about cabbage prices. You come here to listen to court cases, argue about taxes, and maybe steal a fig when no one's looking. As you step into the sprawling square, you're immediately hit with the distinct sound of chaos, an overlapping hum of debate, animal noises, the clank of sandals on stone, and someone singing off-key about grain tariffs. The air smells like a mixture of roasted nuts, dust, incense, and sweaty ambition. It's not pleasant, but it's honest. Everything happens here. Business, justice, religion. Extremely loud conversations about things no one asked to hear. You brush past a man enthusiastically promoting his homemade wine, which tastes like melted raisins and regret. He insists it's medicinal. You nod politely and quicken your pace before he offers you a sample. Today's crowd is especially thick. You squeeze through a cluster of matrons loudly whispering about someone's scandalous affair with a gladiator. Their togas are pristine. Their gossip is brutal. You catch a name you recognize, and then immediately pretend you didn't. In Rome, gossip spreads faster than plague, and it's only slightly less fatal. To your left, a group of men are engaged in what they claim is a philosophical discussion, but what sounds a lot like a shouting match about which god has the best beard. One man argues passionately for Jupiter. Another insists it's Neptune. A third chimes in with Bacchus, if you squint. A fourth is just yelling because he likes the acoustics. You make your way toward the speaker's platform, the rostra, where a man is attempting to deliver a political speech to a crowd that is more interested in the free bread being handed out behind him. He waves dramatically, quoting Cicero, but is upstaged by a runaway goat with a bell tied to its neck. The goat wins the debate. Court cases are happening in the open air, right in front of everyone. No privacy, no microphones, just public shaming at maximum volume. You pause to watch a trial unfold. One man accuses another of stealing his olive press. The accused argues that it fell into his yard by accident. The judge looks like he hasn't slept since Nero's reign. Eventually, he shrugs and fines both of them just to make it stop. Further down, a street preacher is passionately warning a group of very bored children that the end is near and everyone must stop eating oysters. The children are clearly just there for the free snacks. The preacher pauses mid-rant to take a bite of his own oyster. Hypocrisy is alive and well. You pass a man selling wax tablets and styluses. He shouts at you. Write your will before your neighbor does it for you. A surprisingly effective sales pitch. You consider it, especially after remembering how aggressively your neighbor eyes your sandals every morning. The Forum isn't just for legal drama and philosophical noise pollution. It's also the social media feed of ancient Rome. News is shared here, rumors are born here, and reputations are both built and publicly shredded here. You overhear 3 versions of the same scandal within 10 feet, and each one involves different animals and increasingly unlikely food items. You decide not to ask for clarification. Religious ceremonies occasionally break up the flow of things. A priest walks by carrying a chicken that looks deeply done with its current existence. There's a small shrine where people are offering coins, bread, or vaguely worded hopes for financial stability. A man asks the gods for a successful business day. He's immediately hit by bird poop, interpret as you will. Vendors fill every available space. There's a man selling sandals next to a man selling fish, and somewhere in the overlap, there's an odor so powerful it feels like a minor assault. A woman offers to sell you a charm that will keep your spouse faithful. You ask if it works. She laughs and says no. Everything is loud. Nothing is filtered. A man selling honeyed nuts is arguing with a poet about meter. Two women are embroiled in a shouting match over a stolen cloak, which may or may not exist. A stray dog is being pursued by a child holding what appears to be a partially eaten melon. No one intervenes. This is Rome. This is normal. You pause near a statue of an emperor that pigeons have clearly claimed as their own. Someone's carved graffiti at the base, something rude about the Senate, and a particularly ugly mule. The irony is, the mule probably has more consistent policies. The sun is high now, beating down on marble and scalp alike. You wipe sweat from your brow with the hem of your tunic, which only helps if you're into the smell of ancient leg. You consider buying a drink, but the nearest seller looks like he reuses cups and collects his water directly from the Tiber. Eventually, you find a quietish corner near the Temple of Saturn, where you can sit on a stone ledge and pretend to ponder the fate of the Republic while sneakily eating a fig you definitely did not pay for. It's warm, slightly squished, and tastes like small rebellion. Victory. Here, in the chaos of the Forum, you're reminded that Rome is less of a city and more of a living, brawling, deeply dramatic entity. It talks loudly, it moves constantly, and it absolutely judges your sandals. But it's also kind of wonderful. In a sweaty, unpredictable, mildly dangerous kind of way. You brush the fig juice off your fingers, take a deep breath of incense, meets goat air, and stand up. Time to rejoin the madness. You have to go. But this is Rome, so privacy is a myth. The public latrine is a long marble bench with holes and no dividers. You sit elbow to elbow with strangers, doing your business while discussing philosophy and pretending not to notice the communal sponge on a stick. Yes, the communal sponge. Let's get that out of the way early. Affectionately referred to as a tersorium, it's a stick with a sponge on the end, kept in a bucket of vinegar water and allegedly cleaned between uses. Allegedly. It is shared by everyone. It is not optional. It is history's worst group project. The public toilet, or latrina publica, is a fixture of Roman society. It's where you go not just to relieve yourself, but to socialize, catch up on news, and, depending on your luck, make or ruin lifelong friendships. There are no partitions, no stalls, just a stone bench with perfectly spaced circular openings like musical chairs, but with significantly more consequences. You find a spot. The only open one is between a sweating fishmonger and a man who is loudly humming the theme from a gladiator match he once saw in Gaul. You nod politely, hoist your tunic just high enough to maintain Roman dignity, and sit. The bench is cold, startlingly cold. It sends a very direct message to your nervous system that you are, in fact, now participating in something deeply undignified. Below the marble bench is a continuous trough of running water, meant to carry away whatever contributions you and your fellow citizens leave behind. It mostly works. Sometimes, when the aqueduct pressure is good and no one's upstream using it to clean their sandals or wash a goat, the smell is exactly what you'd expect from a place where dozens of people gather to relax together while nature takes its course. There's a certain pungency, equal parts humanity, vinegar, and the ghost of lunches past. But your nose adjusts. Eventually, as you settle in, the man beside you strikes up a conversation about the recent grain shortage. You nod, contributing a few appropriately timed mms, while trying not to lose focus on your primary objective. Meanwhile, someone 2 seats down is reciting lines from Virgil, which you suppose is meant to distract from the gurgling sounds coming from the water channel beneath the bench. Above you, the walls are decorated with faded frescoes, some tasteful, some not. One appears to be a heroic depiction of a man battling a hydra. Another is just a poorly drawn fish. Someone has scratched a message into the stone next to your elbow. It reads, "Marcus was here. Also, don't use sponge on the left." Duly noted. A man across from you is gesturing animatedly with a half-eaten fig as he tells a story about how his cousin once found a lost ring in the latrine and sold it to a senator. The fig wobbles perilously close to dropping through the hole. Tension builds. You can't look away. To your right, a woman enters, not uncommon in Rome, as public toilets are often co-ed. She sits down, adjusts her shawl, and begins loudly arguing with her reflection in the water bucket. You choose not to engage. This is not your battle. You begin to consider the sponge. There it sits, soggy and ominous, resting in its bucket like some ancient creature waiting to be summoned. There is no toilet paper. There are no alternatives. You could use a leaf, but good luck finding one that hasn't already been used or nibbled by a rat with low standards. You remind yourself that the vinegar in the bucket is supposed to be antiseptic. You remind yourself that everyone else does it. You remind yourself that you once ate street cheese from a cart with visible mold and lived to tell the tale. You reach for the sponge. Slowly, reluctantly, regrettably, the moment passes. You do what you must. You do not make eye contact with anyone. Once finished, you adjust your tunic, rise with as much dignity as you can gather in such a place, and shuffle toward the exit, stepping carefully to avoid puddles that are better left unidentified. You nod at the next person entering. It's polite. They nod back. It's a shared trauma. Outside, the air is fresher. Not fresh, exactly, but less pungent than what you've just experienced. You take a deep breath and appreciate the gentle breeze, the distant sound of a lute, and the complete absence of communal cleaning implements. In a way, the Roman public latrine is a perfect metaphor for the empire itself, impressive in its engineering, efficient in its purpose, and completely indifferent to your personal comfort. It's a marvel of ancient sanitation, a hub of civic life, and also a place where your soul goes to lie down and weep. But it worked. Sort of. You relieved yourself, participated in a group chat, and learned more than you wanted to about cabbage tariffs. You are now ready to re-enter Roman society. You survived the latrina, and honestly, that's more than most tourists can say. If you're lucky, you sneak back home for a nap. Romans call it a meridiatio, and it's one of the few things they absolutely got right. You collapse onto your lumpy straw mattress, dream of wine and figs, and try not to inhale too much smoke from the neighbor's fish stew. It's the 6th hour, what we'd call around noon, and the city has reached peak noise, heat, and emotional instability. The streets are hot enough to roast a lizard. Your sandals are filled with dust and regret. Every muscle in your body aches from being alive, in a world with no ergonomic anything. You need rest. Desperately. And for once, Rome agrees with you, because while Romans may have had questionable opinions on hygiene and communal sponges, they did understand the value of an afternoon nap. Businesses close, markets wind down, even the goats stop yelling. For a brief moment, the city exhales, and if you time it right, you can disappear back into your insula and steal an hour of unconscious peace before the sun starts cooking the roof tiles. You make your way home, dodging the last few vendors still hollering about their discount garum and suspicious sausages. The walk is slower now, heavy with the heat. Even the pigeons look exhausted, flapping lazily from shadow to shadow like tiny feathered drunks. Back in your apartment, it's slightly cooler, if by cooler, you mean only mildly suffocating. The air is still and smells faintly of sweat, oil, and that strange herbal thing your neighbor burns to keep away demons or rats. Maybe both. You collapse onto your straw mattress, which is not so much a bed as a glorified sack of itchy hay and fabric scraps. It crunches beneath you like a warning. You shift your weight, trying to find the one non-pokey spot, and eventually settle into a position that feels survivable. You close your eyes. Somewhere, a child screams. Somewhere else, a dog is barking at absolutely nothing. It's not total silence, but this is Rome. This is peace. Your body begins to relax. The tension in your shoulders eases. Your brain starts to drift into that weird pre-nap fog, where you're not sure if you're asleep or just watching a mental slideshow of all the times you tripped over your own sandal. The straw mattress groans. You groan louder. It's a duet of exhaustion. Dreams come quickly in Rome, probably because your brain is trying to escape reality for a bit. Today's nap dream is a classic. You're reclining in a villa, sipping chilled wine, being fanned by a servant who looks suspiciously like your neighbor's uncle while someone hand-feeds you grapes. None of these things are in your budget, but your subconscious has high aspirations. Then comes the fish stew. The smell seeps in like a slow, fragrant betrayal. Your upstairs neighbor, for reasons known only to the gods and his digestive system, is boiling something that contains fish, garlic, possibly turnips, and definitely revenge. The scent drifts downward, curls under your door, and settles into your dreams like an unwanted guest. You try to ignore it. You turn over, You cover your face with a cloth that used to be white, now somewhere between beige and historical artifact. But it's no use. The stew is stronger than your defenses. You briefly consider confronting him, but then you remember he once yelled a man into tears over the price of olives. You stay in bed. Still, there's something undeniably soothing about this mid-afternoon break. Your tunic sticks to your back. Your knees ache from squatting at the communal latrine. But for a precious stretch of time, you don't have to carry anything, cook anything, argue with anyone, or listen to a guy recite terrible poetry at the forum fountain. In fact, if you listen closely, you can hear the rest of the city drifting into the same half-conscious state. Conversations fade. The constant clatter of sandals against stone slows. Even the ever-dramatic neighbor across the alley has paused her yelling, perhaps mid-nap herself, dreaming of fancier sandals and less judgmental cats. You start to drift again. This time, the dream is better. You're a successful merchant, lounging on a couch in the triclinium, being serenaded by a man playing the lute while you eat honey cakes and tell people what to do. It's nice. Until, of course, a goat walks into the room and eats your dream sandals. Typical. Just as you're slipping into the deepest part of your nap mouth open, dreams soft and weird, something crashes outside. Loud, sharp, wooden. You jolt upright, heart pounding, hair stuck to your face. Someone down the street has knocked over a cart full of amphorae. The shouting begins. A toddler starts wailing. Somewhere, someone is blaming Mercury retrograde, even though astrology is more Greek than Roman. You sigh. Nap time is over. You sit up, bones creaking like ancient hinges, and blink at the hazy light filtering through your tiny window. Your back hurts in 3 new places. Your mouth tastes like regret and that fig you found earlier. But you feel slightly better. Not great. Not even good. But just awake enough to return to the Roman grind. You splash some water on your face, pat down your tunic, and prepare to re-enter the outside world. A world of heat, shouting, mystery stews, and that goat who definitely has it out for you. The Meridiatio is over. The city is waking up again. And so must you. Reluctantly, but at least you had an hour. An hour where no one asked you to explain tax law or buy pickled onions. An hour where the only battle you fought was with a fish-scented breeze and a mattress full of straw. In ancient Rome, that's basically a spa day. Shopping in Rome is an extreme sport. The Macellum, or market, is packed with people haggling over everything from garum, fermented fish sauce, to suspicious sausages. Prices are flexible, insults are creative, and someone's always trying to sell you olives that may or may not be from last year. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Not a gentle wafting aroma, but an aggressive olfactory slap that says, "Welcome to commerce." It's a potent blend of raw meat, warm cheese, overripe fruit, drying herbs, damp wool, and about 9 types of questionable fish. Somewhere in the background, you detect a faint hint of urine, ambition, and burned chickpeas. You take a deep breath and immediately regret it. Vendors shout over one another, each trying to lure in customers with louder voices and increasingly absurd promises. My lentils were blessed by the Vestal Virgins. These figs were kissed by Fortuna herself. 2 chickens for 1 coin, and a 3rd chicken to judge you. You do not believe any of them, but the energy is contagious. You weave your way through the narrow lanes between stalls, each one a chaotic explosion of produce, pottery, and mild emotional manipulation. You pass a woman selling cured meats that appear to be sweating in the sun, and a man with a cart of amphorae who insists his wine tastes like victory. You suspect it tastes like regret, but he's got the best sample cups. You stop at a spice vendor's stall, drawn in by the heady smell of imported cinnamon and mystery powders. He eyes you suspiciously, as if you're going to steal his coriander. You ask about the price of pepper. He tells you it's rare, expensive, and possibly cursed. You buy a pinch anyway, because cursed pepper still tastes better than Roman beans. Now it's time for the real sport. Bartering. You approach the olive seller. He's got 3 baskets. Fresh, slightly aged, and historic. You point to the freshest looking batch. He names a price so outrageous you briefly forget how numbers work. You counter with an amount so low he gasps like you just insulted his grandmother. The dance begins. Hands fly. Eyebrows raise. Other shoppers glance over to rate your performance. Eventually, you settle on a price that is either a fantastic deal or a complete scam. It's hard to tell. You hand over your coins, and he tosses in a free olive branch for luck. You accept it solemnly. You now own a very greasy snack and a stick. Progress. Next up, vegetables. The produce stall is a visual symphony of color and dirt. Carrots with entire ecosystems still clinging to them. Leeks that look like they've seen war. Cabbages stacked higher than the law should allow. You reach for a plum. The vendor slaps your hand away with a leek. You touch. You buy, she says, squinting like she's dared you to start something. You back away slowly and admire from a distance. In the meat section, things get vivid. Animal carcasses dangle from hooks like bizarre holiday decorations. Flies buzz with purpose. A butcher waves a cleaver and shouts, "Half a pig, today only." A customer next to you argues that the liver looks too introspective. The butcher shrugs and throws in a kidney. You consider buying fish, but the fish consider you first. Their eyes are glassy, their mouths slightly open in a silent scream. You politely decline and move on, narrowly avoiding a man carrying an entire eel like a very aggressive necktie. Everywhere you go, people are haggling, yelling, and swapping gossip with the same intensity as senators debating tax law. Someone whispers that Claudia's husband was seen buying figs from a different market. Scandalous. Another man boasts that his wife made soup so good the neighbor wept. The neighbor is standing right there and does not deny it. A group of children runs by, chasing a chicken that has clearly had enough of life. It flaps. They scream. Someone drops a basket of turnips. No one helps. This is Rome. This is normal. You finally stop at a baked goods stall. The baker, covered in a heroic amount of flour, smiles and offers you a libum, a sweet cheese bread that looks like it might just make your day better. You ask what's in it. He shrugs. Mostly hope. Sold. As you chew the warm, slightly lumpy pastry, you pause to admire the madness around you. This market, chaotic and loud as it is, works. People get what they need, share what they know, and occasionally throw a turnip at someone they dislike. It's messy, it's loud, it's alive. With your arms full of olives, onions, pepper, mystery bread, and emotional exhaustion, you finally make your way toward the exit, dodging one last man trying to sell you genuine Egyptian garlic. It's definitely Roman. He winks. You shake your head. He shrugs and tries the next passerby. You step out into the sunlight, victorious. You have bartered. You have navigated fish and flying children. You have survived. Shopping in Rome isn't just commerce. It's theatre. It's blood sport. It's a daily ritual that tests your patience, your acting skills, and your nasal tolerance. And somehow, you kind of love it. Fashion is functional. Mostly. If you're a woman, you wear a stola, essentially a decorative potato sack. If you're a man of importance, you wear a toga that takes 5 years to fold properly and makes going to the bathroom a logistical nightmare. Everyone has sandal blisters. Everyone. Now, let's be clear. This isn't Paris Fashion Week. This is ancient Rome, where fashion isn't about trends or self-expression. It's about status, survival, and covering your bits with whatever fabric you can afford that hasn't been nibbled by rats. The average Roman doesn't have a walk-in closet. They have a hook, maybe a box, maybe a shared hook. And on that hook hangs their daily outfit, the tunica. It's a long, mostly shapeless linen or wool garment that you slip over your head and tie with a belt. That's it. No zippers, no buttons, no stylish asymmetrical hems, just one big rectangle of "please don't judge me, I'm trying my best." If you're a woman, your stola is layered over your tunic and belted at the waist, creating the timeless silhouette known as Roman elegance, or, depending on the day, mobile curtain. The palla, a shawl worn over the shoulders or head, adds a touch of flair and also doubles as a baby sling, a privacy screen, or emergency sunshade when the Mediterranean sun decides to aggressively roast everyone. And let's talk colours. The brighter and more vibrant your clothing, the richer you probably are. Dyes aren't cheap. Deep purples, rich reds, and vivid blues all scream, "I can afford to look fabulous while judging you." Most people wear various shades of beige, off-white, and this used to be white before the laundry tragedy of Saturnalia. Now, the toga. Oh, the toga. The fashion statement of the Roman elite. A vast, heavy, woolen sheet, roughly the size of a small tent, draped in a very specific way that required practice, patience, and possibly divine intervention. The toga virilis, toga of manhood, is your basic adult male model. The toga praetexta has a fancy purple border reserved for magistrates and rich teenagers who've already peaked. Wearing a toga is a full-body workout. It doesn't stay on easily, it restricts your movement, and it has the same airflow as a wool blanket in a sauna. You can't run in it. You can't really sit comfortably in it. You definitely can't relieve yourself in a hurry, which is a problem when your dinner party includes boiled beans and no exits. Still, the toga isn't just clothing, it's social armor. It tells people you're someone. It says, I have political opinions and a personal slave to help me fold this thing. So you endure it. You practice the art of toga draping until you can do it without knocking over a lamp or strangling yourself. Or at least without tripping over the hem and becoming forum gossip. Kids have their own fashion rules. Young boys wear short tunics, often belted high to allow maximum mobility for stick fighting and mischief. Young girls wear scaled-down versions of the stola, though theirs often come with more dirt and fewer expectations. Infants, unsurprisingly, are mostly swaddled like burritos and carried around like accessories that occasionally scream. Hair is part of fashion too. For men, it's relatively simple. Short, neat, and clean-shaven is the goal. Beards go in and out of style depending on who's emperor. You don't want to get caught with facial hair if the current ruler hates it. You could be mistaken for a philosopher. And no one wants that level of unsolicited debate before breakfast. Women's hairstyles, however, are a full-time job. Wealthy women wear elaborate updos involving curls, braids, and enough pins to arm a small army. If you're rich, you have a slave whose entire job is to make sure your hair looks like an architectural marvel. If you're not rich, you do your best with some oil, a comb, and a prayer to Venus. Accessories? Absolutely. Brooches, fibulae. Hold your garments in place. Necklaces and bracelets add flair. Rings are everywhere. Some people even wear amulets to ward off evil spirits or particularly aggressive creditors. If you're a woman of status, you might own a speculum, a polished metal mirror that shows you a warped version of yourself, much like today's social media. And then there's footwear. Roman sandals, or calci, are both revolutionary and incredibly painful. Made from stiff leather and tied with straps, they offer all the comfort of walking barefoot on gravel while being hugged by angry vines. No socks, no cushioning, just blisters and hope. Everyone has calluses. Everyone has that one sandal strap that constantly breaks and has been tied back together with string. Dignity be damned. There are variations, of course. Soldiers wear caligae, heavy-duty sandals with hobnails on the soles. They clank as they walk, making sure everyone knows, I have a sword and very sore feet. Rich folks wear closed shoes indoors to avoid the horrors of stepping on loose grapes or small scorpions. Slaves go barefoot. Always. Clothing laws, or sumptuary laws, also dictate what you can't wear. You can't walk around pretending to be a senator if you're not. You can't wear certain colors unless you've earned them. And you definitely can't impersonate a Vestal Virgin. Not unless you enjoy being dramatically punished by a very unimpressed priesthood. Fashion in ancient Rome isn't about creativity or self-expression. It's a carefully curated message about who you are, how much you earn, and whether you're important enough to be uncomfortable in public. So you adjust your tunic, scratch at a sandal blister, and smooth the folds of your socially appropriate toga or whatever you've thrown over your shoulder to pass as one. You're not comfortable, you're not stylish, but you look Roman, and that's what matters. Even if the goat staring at you from the alley seems unimpressed, Roman kids are everywhere. They play games with nuts, chase chickens, and sometimes get miniature togas just to feel superior. School is mostly shouting Latin at each other. If you're a parent, you've already given up trying to stop them from sword fighting with breadsticks. There's no such thing as a quiet Roman child. They're loud by design, chaotic by nature, and somehow always sticky. No one knows why. Even if you've just bathed them, within minutes they're covered in crumbs, mud, and mysterious street goo. They're like tiny whirlwinds powered by fermented honey and poor decisions. From sunrise to sunset, Roman children are a blur of bare feet, shouting, and mild destruction. They run through alleys, scale walls, and create elaborate games involving sticks, pebbles, and rules that change every 5 minutes depending on who's winning. If you hear shouting in the street and something just broke, odds are it was a child or several testing the structural integrity of a neighbor's wagon wheel. Toys, as you might expect, are low-tech but wildly inventive. Children have dolls made of clay or rags, little carts, spinning tops, and, for reasons known only to the gods, an obsession with animal knucklebones. These astragali are used in games somewhere between dice and vaguely violent marbles. Kids toss them, catch them, gamble with them, or when bored throw them at each other with surprising accuracy. If they're upper class, their toys are fancier miniature chariots, carved figurines, or imported games with actual pieces and rules. If they're poor, they make do with whatever the street provides. Broken pots, lost buttons, and occasionally a live lizard that's been adopted and named Maximus the Squeaky. Education? Technically, yes, but it's less Montessori enrichment and more organized shouting indoors. Boys, especially those from well-off families, are sent to school around the age of 7 to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and how to recite speeches in a tone that suggests moral superiority. The classroom is a rented room, a courtyard, or just someone's shaded porch. There are no desks, there is no recess. There is only wax tablets, styluses, and a ludus full of other children who are louder than yours. The teacher, called a ludi magister, is often underpaid, overworked, and visibly regretting his life choices. He drills the kids on grammar and poetry, occasionally raps a knuckle with a stick, and prays for early retirement. If your son shows promise, he might eventually move on to a grammaticus to study literature and philosophy. If not, he'll probably end up inheriting your sandal shop and yelling about leather prices until he's 90. Girls? Well, it depends. Most don't get formal schooling. Instead, they learn domestic skills from their mothers. How to spin wool, grind grain, keep the household gods happy, and quietly judge people at dinner parties. Unless your daughter is from a wealthy family or unusually clever, or both, she's not reciting Cicero anytime soon. She's more likely reciting how many olives it takes to fill a jar. But don't let that fool you. Roman girls are just as mischievous as boys. They'll make up songs, steal figs, and practice giving orders to imaginary servants. They play games like My Care, basically Roman rock, paper, scissors, but with fingers, caput et navia, a heads or ships coin toss, and tag with a level of intensity that borders on gladiatorial. Discipline is a mixed bag. Some parents believe in gentle correction. Most favor the classic Roman approach. Firm words, louder words, and the occasional sandal waved threateningly in the air. Children are expected to respect their elders, the household gods, and the terrifying wrath of a grandmother who once fought off a goat with a broom. Birthday parties exist, but they're more modest affairs: bread, cheese, a small cake, and probably a cousin crying because someone ate his fig. Milestones like a bulla, a protective amulet given to children, or the toga virilis ceremony, marking a boy's transition to adulthood, are celebrated with equal parts pride and the quiet panic that your baby is growing up and will soon start complaining about politics. Children also have chores. Lots of chores. Feeding chickens, sweeping floors, fetching water, chasing down escaped goats, and helping their parents at the market. If your child says they're bored, it means they've momentarily forgotten that boredom is a luxury only available to rich senators and lazy cats. Of course, mortality rates being what they are, Roman kids grow up fast if they grow up at all. It's not unusual to lose a child to illness, infection, or an unfortunate accident involving carts, ladders, or overenthusiastic wrestling near the fireplace. Families often don't get too attached until a kid survives to age 10, at which point they start considering them permanent. Despite the risks, Roman children are full of life. They laugh loudly, they run recklessly, they pester philosophers, poke frogs with sticks, and build imaginary empires in the dust. They mimic their parents, tease their siblings, and occasionally say something so sharp it makes even the most battle-hardened legionary blink in stunned silence. At the end of the day, they collapse in a sweaty pile, still arguing about who cheated during knucklebone toss, still trying to convince someone to let them stay up through the evening meal. You tuck them in on their shared straw mat, in a room full of snoring relatives and the faint scent of goat, and whisper a quiet prayer to any god who might help them sleep through the night. Because tomorrow, they'll do it all again. Loudly, gleefully, with bruised knees, stolen apples, and an attitude that says, I might not pay taxes yet, but I already have opinions. And honestly, you wouldn't have it any other way. You don't have a kitchen. You have a brazier and a deep mistrust of undercooked goat. You chop vegetables while swatting away flies. And if you're feeling fancy, you sprinkle everything with liquamen, a fermented fish sauce that tastes like betrayal and smells like heartbreak. Cooking in ancient Rome is not for the faint of heart. It's for the brave, the desperate, and the people who've accepted that at least one meal a week will end with someone whispering, "Does this smell normal to you?" There's no oven, no fridge, and certainly no spice rack organized by color. What you do have is a small charcoal brazier, a few clay pots, a blunt knife, and a dream. The culina, the Roman version of a kitchen, is usually the corner of a room, near a window, for smoke, and very close to flammable materials, for chaos. If you're lucky, your insula hasn't caught fire this week, but you're always one cooking session away from a real-life disaster recipe. You keep a bucket of water nearby just in case. Also for washing, also for drinking, also for emotionally staring into when the lentils burn again. You begin with the basics. Bread, beans, onions, garlic. The Roman food pyramid is mostly carbs, wine, and lies. You soak your lentils to make them less angry on the stomach, then boil them until they resemble something between porridge and wallpaper paste. You slice some leeks, squint at a suspicious carrot, and pretend it's fresh. You don't have seasoning, per se. You have salt if you're lucky, herbs if they're not wilted, and liquamen if your nose has stopped working. Ah, liquamen. Let's talk about it. It's made by fermenting fish guts in the sun for weeks, until the mixture transforms from biohazard to Roman condiment. Every household has a jar, every jar has a story. You use it in everything: soups, stews, vegetables, even desserts, because the Romans did not believe in boundaries. You dab a few drops into your bean pot, stir, sniff, and immediately regret stirring. Meat is a luxury. If you have it, it's probably yesterday's scraps or something questionably obtained from a street vendor who swears the leg came from a goat, not a large rat. You stew it slowly, praying to Mercury for tenderness and not tetanus. Romans don't believe in rare meat. Everything is cooked until it's indistinguishable from a sandal, then seasoned with vinegar to bring out the flavor of chewy. Fish is more common, especially if you live near the Tiber. But so are fish bones, fish scales, and fish with more opinions than sense. You gut it yourself, rinse it in water that's probably not clean, and cook it over the brazier while trying to keep the neighborhood cat from making a surprise attack. The cat always wins. Vegetables are reliable. Sort of. You've got cabbage, lentils, onions, more onions, and leafy greens that may or may not be decorative weeds. You stew them all together into something called pulse, a thick porridge that the average Roman eats at least once a day. It's filling, bland, and capable of doubling as mortar. You serve it with pride and a lot of wine. Wine, by the way, is not what you're imagining. It's cheap, strong, and always diluted with water, because even the Romans knew it was dangerous in full form. You sip it while cooking to make the prep feel more glamorous, even though your hair is full of steam and your toga smells like singed celery. You consider adding the wine to the stew. You accidentally add your entire cup. It improves the flavor. Barely. Dessert is rare, but not impossible. Maybe you have some dates, figs, or a bit of honey. If you're feeling ambitious, you mash up some cheese with honey and pine nuts into a kind of ancient cheesecake that tastes shockingly okay, if you ignore the fact that the cheese was aged on a windowsill next to your neighbor's laundry. As you stir your pot with the dedication of a hopeful alchemist, the smoke begins to thicken. You wave your hand in front of your face, open a window that doesn't open, and wonder how much longer until something smells done. The answer is, when someone yells from the other room, "Is something burning?" That's your timer. You taste your creation. It's hot, salty, and vaguely edible. You call it rustic. You plate it in mismatched bowls, hand one to your child, and pray their picky phase has ended. It hasn't. They push the vegetables aside and ask if there's chicken. There isn't. There's never chicken. Cleanup is simple. One rag, one bowl of water, and the faint hope that nothing was poisonous. You scrape the pot clean with a piece of stale bread, call it a second course, and collapse into your chair, fully exhausted by the act of boiling beans and surviving. And yet, there's a weird kind of pride in it, because you just made dinner without fire codes, refrigeration, or even a working recipe. You fed your family using centuries-old guesswork and a fish sauce that smells like a moral failure. You turned chaos into cuisine, and that, in Rome, is the highest culinary achievement of all. If you're invited to a dinner party, Congrats, you're either rich or interesting. The meal goes on for hours. You recline on a couch, eat with your hands, and try to look glamorous while chewing pickled dormice. There's poetry, wine, and passive-aggressive toasts. It's like Thanksgiving, but with fewer pants. The Roman Cena is not just a meal, it's an Olympic event of eating, gossiping, performing, and pretending you like the host's wine. It usually kicks off in the late afternoon and doesn't end until someone falls asleep on their back, mid-toast, or gets into a heated philosophical debate over lentils. First things first, the guest list. It's carefully curated. You don't just show up with your +1 and a bottle of cheap wine. You get invited because you're a senator, a famous poet, a local scandal, or the cousin of someone who blackmailed the host. You might not know everyone at the table, but you absolutely know who outranks you, and you adjust your laughter accordingly. You arrive wearing your finest tunic or stola, freshly scrubbed, hair oiled, and sandals polished, or at least not actively falling apart. The host greets you with a fake warm smile and a very real calculation of how many compliments you'll offer before dessert. You compliment the decor. You compliment the dog. You compliment the dog's decorative collar. You're in. The dining area is set up in the triclinium, a 3-couch arrangement around a central table. You don't sit, you recline. On your left elbow, always the left. The right hand is for eating, gesturing, and occasionally fending off the guy next to you who's gotten very passionate about stoicism. The couches are covered in rich textiles and possibly crumbs from last night's guests. You pretend not to notice. You strike a pose, one that says, "I'm relaxed but alert, casual but ready to judge." Then the courses begin. The first course gustatio is the appetizer round. You're offered olives, eggs, small fish, maybe a salad if your host is trying to seem virtuous. The olives are salty, the fish is aggressively pickled, and the salad is mostly herbs. You eat slowly, elegantly, as if your fingers were born for this. Someone beside you already has oil on their chin. You pretend not to see it. You're better than that. Then comes the prima mensa, the main course. This is where the culinary chaos truly begins. Platters of roasted meats, stuffed vegetables, and elaborate dishes arrive in a theatrical procession, often accompanied by slaves who double as food bearers and impromptu narrators. One announces, "Here we have a flamingo tongue, cooked in honey and regret." Everyone applauds. You take a small bite and nod solemnly. It's chewy. There might be wild boar, dormice stuffed with nuts and herbs, or peacock eggs arranged in artistic spirals. Everything is either roasted, boiled, or covered in garum, that fermented fish sauce that somehow makes every dish taste like it was dared into existence. You eat, nod, and comment on the earthiness. That means it tastes like dirt. But no one will call you out if you say it with confidence. As the food piles up, so does the conversation. The host drops quotes from Virgil like confetti. Someone mentions the grain market. Someone else casually name-drops a gladiator they sort of knew. And a man at the end of the table tries to recite a love poem while hiccuping. Everyone is trying to outdo each other in culture, wit, or volume. You join in with a story that may or may not be entirely true. It doesn't matter, it's about the delivery. Between courses, your cup is constantly refilled with wine. Roman wine is strong, but always diluted with water unless the host is trying to get people loose enough to talk politics or start drama. You sip, you swirl, you try to avoid the moment when someone suggests a toast. Toasts are traps. You must either compliment the host without sounding desperate, or insult someone with flair. Most people do both. Dessert secunda mensa finally arrives. Fruits, nuts, honey cakes, and occasionally something involving dates and cheese that tastes suspiciously like ambition. You nibble slowly, already half asleep, while a man in a corner starts playing the cithara, an instrument that sounds like a harp having a midlife crisis. At this point, anything can happen. Someone might begin a dramatic reading. Someone else might dance. A philosophical debate about fate could turn into an arm wrestling match. You might even witness a drunken senator weeping into a fig. It's all part of the charm. Eventually, guests begin to leave. Some quietly slip out after dessert. Others linger, pretending they aren't eyeing the exit. You offer one last compliment to your host, something vague and polite like, "The dormice were very layered." The host beams. You've done your duty. You walk home under the stars, full of wine, slightly bloated, and still mentally debating whether that thing you ate was actually pork or just well-seasoned turnip. Your feet hurt. Your tunic smells like smoke and grape juice. But you were seen. You were part of it. In Rome, dinner isn't just about food, it's theatre. It's networking. It's survival, reputation, and social climbing with a side of fish sauce. And if you played your cards right, you might even get invited back. Just maybe not on a night with the pickled dormice. Baths are Rome's version of a spa/gym/social network. You start with a steam, scrape off the oil with your trusty strigil, and end with a cold plunge that makes you question your life choices. There's nudity, arguing, and at least one guy trying to sell you an amulet. If you're a Roman, going to the thermae isn't a luxury, it's part of the daily routine. Cleanliness is next to godliness, and also next to a man named Gaius who won't stop flexing. For a small fee, you get access to the full experience. A place to wash, socialize, work out, nap, complain about politics, and potentially pick up a fungal infection. Truly, the full Roman package. Your visit begins at the apoditerium, the changing room. It's a large, echoey space lined with stone benches and cubbyholes for storing your belongings. You disrobe, try to casually ignore the fact that everyone is already naked, and stash your clothes in a niche that looks questionably secure. You leave your sandals behind and immediately step on something damp and mysterious. You keep walking. You do not investigate. From there, it's off to the palaestra, the open-air gymnasium, where men are already hurling discus, wrestling, and grunting like overcooked boars. If you're in the mood to sweat before you sweat, you can join in. If not, you fake a few stretches and head straight to the steam room, nodding politely at a man trying to balance a javelin and his dignity. The sudatorium, or steam room, is where things get serious. It's hot. Not warm and relaxing hot. It's, am I being slow roasted? Hot. The air is thick with steam, body odor, and whispered insults about your cousin's new boyfriend. You sit on the stone bench, sweating from places you didn't know could sweat, and try to look casual as your earlobes begin to melt. This is also where the gossip happens. The baths are Rome's answer to social media. News travels fast, loud, and half-true. You learn who's divorcing whom, who bribed a magistrate, and which senator's toupee is actually a cleverly trained ferret. You pretend not to care. You absolutely care. Once you're thoroughly cooked, it's time to clean up. And in Rome, that means oil. You lather yourself in olive oil, not scented, not fancy. Just pure, greasy lubrication, and begin the ancient ritual of scraping yourself down with a strigil. It's a curved metal blade designed to remove oil, sweat, dead skin, and any last shred of self-respect. The sensation is somewhere between satisfying and help. I'm exfoliating my soul. You watch as your friend Lucius scrapes his back with all the enthusiasm of someone scrubbing barnacles off a ship. You offer to help. He declines. He's still recovering from the last time someone scraped him too hard, and he hallucinated the goddess Minerva. Now it's time for the baths themselves, and they come in 3 terrifying temperatures. First, the tepidarium, the warm bath. It's a nice place to adjust, relax, and wonder if the guy next to you has ever actually heard of personal space. Then comes the caldarium, the hot bath. This is where your pores open, your blood pressure rises, and your ancestors begin whispering from the other side. You lower yourself slowly into the water, trying not to look like you're silently screaming. It's boiling. You smile through gritted teeth as an elderly man next to you sighs in bliss and mutters something about a good scalding keeping the demons away. You nod. It's unclear if he means spiritual demons or just his grandchildren. Eventually, it's time for the final challenge. The frigidarium, the cold plunge. You walk across the stone floor, still slick with oil and ambition, and stare into the chilly pool. It looks innocent. It is not. You lower yourself in, inch by inch, like a nervous flamingo. The moment your entire body is submerged, your soul briefly leaves. You let out a noise that can only be described as a high-pitched whimper, and try to convince yourself this is refreshing and not a mild medical emergency. Once you recover from the cold bath and regain your ability to form coherent thoughts, you lounge for a bit on a bench in the courtyard. The sun is setting, the air is cooler, and a man is still trying to sell you a magic amulet to improve your charisma and digestion. You politely decline. He insists. You begin to consider it. There's food available, light snacks like dates, nuts, maybe a bit of bread. You chew slowly while eavesdropping on 2 men arguing about whose cousin should have won the poetry contest last week. It's getting heated. One of them begins quoting Horace. The other throws a date pit. You decide it's time to leave. Back in the upper deuterium, you retrieve your tunic, still there, and put it on carefully over your still damp skin, which now smells like oil, steam, and mild success. You comb your hair with your fingers, feel cleaner than you felt in days, and strut out into the street like a man who's just defeated grime in glorious combat. The Roman baths aren't just a place to wash, they're a theatre of the body, a court of public opinion, and the empire's most effective rumour mill. You came here to cleanse, and instead you overheard 2 conspiracies, 3 political campaigns, and what might be the beginning of a new religion based on steam and optimism. You survived. You're cleaner, you're greasier, you're definitely more confused about the amulet thing, but most of all, you're Roman. And that's what the baths are really for. You light a candle for Jupiter, whisper a prayer to Vesta, and try not to offend Mercury again. Religion in Rome is a full-time job. There are omens to interpret, chickens to watch for signs, and household gods to appease when your soup boils over. The Roman gods are everywhere. Not metaphorically, literally everywhere. They're watching your harvest, your marriage, your plumbing, and even your breakfast. There's a god for door hinges, a god for boundaries, a god for mold. You can't throw a pebble in Rome without offending at least 3 minor deities and triggering a week of bad luck. Your day starts with the lares, the household gods. These little statues live in a small shrine in the corner of your home, usually near the kitchen because food is sacred, and also because that's where people tend to scream at inanimate objects. You give them a sprinkle of wine, maybe a bit of bread or fruit, and ask them not to let your roof cave in today. They don't speak back, but you like to think they're listening. Next, it's time to make sure you haven't annoyed any of the big gods. You nod to Jupiter, the sky daddy of all gods, just in case he's having a thunderstormy mood. Then there's Juno, who handles marriage and jealousy, often at the same time. You offer her a flower and mentally apologize for every argument you've ever had with your spouse. Vesta is in charge of the hearth and the sacred flame. If her flame goes out, the entire state might collapse. No pressure. You whisper a prayer while relighting your brazier, and try not to drop the fire stick like last time, when you singed your tunic and traumatized the family goat. Then there's Mercury, god of commerce, travelers, and stealing stuff. You light a small incense stick and beg him not to curse your market purchases. Last week, you forgot and ended up buying what you thought was goat cheese, but turned out to be a very determined lump of lard. Never again. Religion in Rome isn't about belief, it's about participation. Everyone, regardless of how devout or exhausted they feel, is expected to follow the rituals. You don't have to love the gods. You just have to respect them, feed them occasionally, and not insult their temples during wine-fueled rants. Public festivals take up a shocking amount of the calendar. There's Saturnalia, where everything turns upside down and slaves pretend to be masters. There's Lupercalia, which starts with animal sacrifice and ends with lightly drunk people whipping each other with goatskin thongs for fertility. There's a festival for grain, a festival for the dead, and a festival for asking Mars not to destroy your crops with war. You attend most of them for the snacks. Augury, the art of interpreting the will of the gods, is an actual job. An augur stands in a field and watches birds. If they fly left, it means one thing. If they squawk 3 times and poop on a senator, it means something else entirely. Chickens are also used to read omens. If the sacred chickens eat greedily before battle, it's a good sign. If they ignore the food, call off the war, or lie about the results, that also happens. You've personally witnessed a general chuck chicken feed into the coop, declare the birds were extremely enthusiastic, and then march straight into a military disaster. The chickens, naturally, survived. You walk past temples every day. Big ones, small ones, some built specifically to house one rock that fell from the sky and was declared divine. Inside, you might find priests chanting, sacrificing a pig, or adjusting the sacred scrolls. You stop, toss a coin in the offering box, and leave before someone ropes you into joining a ritual. Again, temples aren't quiet places of reflection. They're busy, smoky, and sometimes a little chaotic. People wander in to beg for rain, love, revenge, or a refund from the last merchant who sold them authentic Egyptian garlic. You once saw someone leave a carved figurine of their own foot as a thank you to a healing god. You didn't ask why. You didn't want to know. Religion is personal too. If you're feeling unlucky, you might hire a haruspex, a priest who reads omens by examining the entrails of sacrificed animals. Yes, entrails. He'll poke around in the liver, squint at the spleen, and declare that the gods are generally pleased but mildly concerned about your left shoulder. You nod, thank him, and decide to avoid ladders for a while. There are rules, too. You don't speak during certain rituals. You don't sneeze at the wrong time. You don't walk between the priest and the altar unless you want 3 years of foot fungus and bad luck. Once, your cousin interrupted a festival with a sneeze so loud it reset the entire ceremony. They made everyone start over. No one speaks to him anymore. And then there's the superstitions. You never enter a home with your left foot first. You avoid black dogs on crossroads. You tie charms around your children's necks to ward off the evil eye. You never, ever say a bad word about Pluto, god of the underworld. Not because he'll punish you, but because your neighbors might think you cursed yourself and won't let you borrow their broom. At the end of the day, you return home, light another offering for the lairs, and whisper one final prayer to whatever god handles keeping your roof from leaking. You've navigated omens, honored your shrines, and made it through a full day without insulting a divine being to their face, which, in ancient Rome, counts as a religious success story. Sleep well, but maybe place a sprig of laurel under your pillow just in case. Jupiter's watching. Probably. You feel sick. You go to the medicus. He prescribes a diet of garlic, wine, and crushed mouse bones. If that doesn't work, there's always bleeding, purging, or just hoping the gods get bored and leave you alone. Health insurance does not exist. Neither does germ theory. In ancient Rome, medicine is a complicated stew of half-understood science, religious rituals, kitchen herbs, astrology, and blind optimism. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you walk away with more problems than you arrived with, but at least you got a cool scar and a vague sense that something was balanced. The medicus, your local doctor, is usually trained through a mix of experience, passed down scrolls, and guesswork. He probably owns a copy of Galen's writings, a handful of surgical tools that look suspiciously like gardening implements, and an ego large enough to claim he can cure anything from gout to heartbreak with enough vinegar. The visit starts with a diagnosis. This is not based on symptoms, but on the humours. According to Roman medical theory, your body is ruled by 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you're sick, it means one of these is out of whack. Maybe you have too much phlegm. Maybe your black bile is brooding again. Either way, the answer is usually something dramatic. Let's say you've got a headache. The medicus might prescribe rest, cool compresses, or more likely bleeding. Yes, bleeding. They cut a vein and drain some blood because clearly your body is too full. If your nose bleeds on its own, that's considered a good sign. The body is healing itself. If it doesn't, they'll help it along with a knife and a bowl. If you're lucky, the treatment stops there. If you're less lucky, they'll also recommend a purgative. That's code for drink this and spend the next 12 hours regretting your life choices. It might be made from herbs, ground minerals, or whatever was lying around the apothecary. Either way, it will come out quickly and dramatically from one end or the other, possibly both. Fevers are treated with cooling baths, fasting, and prayers to Apollo. Stomach aches, charcoal, wine, and boiled cabbage. Wounds, honey and spider webs, which actually does help a little, surprisingly. But for broken bones, internal pain, or anything involving the brain, it's a free for all of potions, poultices, and panicked chanting. Leeches are another favourite tool. These little wriggly vampires are believed to balance the humours by drawing out the bad blood. The medicus plops one onto your skin, watches it latch on with enthusiasm, and declares you halfway cured. You're not sure if you feel better, or if you're just lightheaded from blood loss and revulsion. Of course, not everyone trusts doctors. Some prefer the neighbourhood wise woman or healer who deals in herbs, charms, and subtle insults. She gives you a concoction of mint, yarrow, and beetroot, and mutters something about Mercury being in a foul mood. You drink it. It's awful. You burp mint for 3 hours and hope it's working. Then there are the spells. Romans are highly superstitious, and magical cures are surprisingly mainstream. If you've got a persistent cough, someone might inscribe a protective chant on a lead tablet and bury it under your bed. Or hang an amulet shaped like a phallus around your neck to ward off evil spirits. Yes, a phallus. For health, you visit a temple of Aesculapius, the god of healing. People come here to sleep and dream literally. The idea is that the god will visit you in a dream and prescribe a cure. The priest asks what you saw. You say a snake. He nods wisely and says it means you need more onions in your diet. You believe him, mostly because arguing with a man in a toga who owns a sacred snake feels like a bad idea. Surgeries do happen, but let's not sugarcoat it, they're terrifying. Without anesthesia, your best hope is a strong friend to hold you down and a lot of wine. Doctors do amputations, trepanation that's drilling into your skull, and even cataract surgery with a sharp stick. Survival is possible, comfort is not. There are also many remedies involving animals. Crushed ants for toothaches, burnt deer horns for fevers, mouse ashes mixed with wine for ear infections. And if you've got a particularly nasty cold, someone might suggest stuffing a cooked onion up your nose while chanting 3 times in Greek. Results may vary. Still, for all the absurdity, some Roman treatments do work. Clean bandages, fresh water, herbal teas, honey for wounds. In fact, some Roman surgical tools look suspiciously similar to the ones still used today, which makes it all the more confusing when they follow up a perfectly rational ointment with a recommendation to wear a wolf's tooth necklace for balance. And then there are the baths. Not just for hygiene, thermal baths are considered therapeutic. Got joint pain? Soak in hot water. Got fatigue? Cold plunge? Got emotional trauma from the last medicus visit? Steam room. You come out pink, pruny, and slightly more hopeful. By the end of your treatment after the leeches, the bleeding, the spells, and the burnt beetroot compress, you might still feel sick. But you've participated in the full spectrum of Roman medical drama, and that counts for something. You crawl into bed, sip some diluted wine, and place a charm under your pillow just in case. Will it help? Maybe. Or maybe you'll just sleep through it and wake up feeling mysteriously better, which, in ancient Rome, is the closest thing you get to a miracle. You head to the Colosseum. The crowd roars. A gladiator waves. Someone throws a chicken leg. There's blood, drama, and absolutely no safety regulations. If you're not into violence, you can always catch a chariot race at the Circus Maximus and bet on horses named things like Lightning or Stabby. Entertainment in ancient Rome is not subtle. It's loud, chaotic, dangerous, and smells faintly of sweat, wine, and questionable sausage. Whether you're rich or poor, citizen or slave, there's one thing Rome knows how to do. Put on a show so outrageous it makes reality TV look like a knitting circle. The Colosseum, also known as the Flavian Amphitheatre, is the heart of Roman spectacle. It holds upwards of 50,000 screaming fans, all packed together on marble benches under the open sky. There's sun, there's heat, and there's always that one guy with garlic breath shouting predictions like he owns the arena. He doesn't, but he believes in Stabio the Vicious, and frankly, so do you. You push your way into the seating area, past vendors selling spiced nuts, stale bread, and wine in clay cups that somehow already have fingerprints on them. If you're rich, you sit close to the action, under a shaded canopy, fanned by slaves and sipping chilled drinks. If you're poor, you're up top with the rest of the sunburnt mob, trying not to get elbowed by someone selling knockoff laurel wreaths. The games begin with fanfare. Trumpets blare. A parade of exotic animals marches in lions, ostriches, possibly a confused camel. Then come the gladiators, men, and occasionally women, who've trained for this moment, covered in armor, oiled up for dramatic effect, and very aware of their personal brand. One waves to the crowd, another flexes, a third sneezes and is immediately booed. The fights begin, and they are intense. Swords clash, shields slam, sand flies. There's no choreography. This isn't a performance, it's a battle. Sometimes to the death, sometimes not, depending on the crowd's mood and how generous the editor, the person in charge, not a literal editor, is feeling that day. Someone's shield breaks. Someone loses a helmet. Someone trips over their own foot and nearly gets decapitated before the crowd starts chanting his name. You're on your feet before you realize it, holding your half-eaten fig like a pom-pom. You are fully invested in the fate of a man who moments ago was just the tall one with the trident. But gladiators aren't the only attraction. There are mock naval battles, staged hunts with wild animals, and even theatrical executions for prisoners, because apparently Rome decided that law and order could use a little extra showbiz. Sometimes they reenact famous battles with props, costumes, and an enthusiastic disregard for historical accuracy. It's like dinner theatre, but with more lions. If swords and sand aren't your thing, you can always head over to the Circus Maximus, the largest chariot racing stadium in Rome, and a place where the laws of physics take a coffee break. Over 250,000 people can cram into the stands, all screaming, sweating, and placing bets with men who look like they haven't slept since Caesar was alive. Chariot races are fast, furious, and incredibly stupid. Four-horse teams called quadrigae whip around a track at breakneck speed, trying to avoid flipping over at the corners or crashing into each other like very stylish wrecking balls. The drivers, usually slaves or freedmen, stand in tiny platforms barely big enough to hold their sandals, holding onto the reins like their lives depend on it. Because they do. The horses have names that inspire confidence or fear. Thunderbolt, Dust Eater, Nays before Bros. The most popular teams are color-coded: the reds, blues, greens, and whites. People have preferences, strong preferences. Entire families have been torn apart over team loyalty. If you cheer for the greens in a red family household, you sleep outside with the goats. Fights break out in the stands. Someone throws a sandal, someone throws a chair, someone throws up. A man next to you offers to bet his sister's dowry on the next race. You politely decline and move 2 benches away. Back at the smaller local amphitheaters, there's more niche entertainment. Mimes, comedic plays, musicians, jugglers, and wandering philosophers who accidentally wander into people's picnics and begin unsolicited monologues about fate and legumes. It's all free if you don't mind sitting next to a man eating olives straight from the jar with his fingers. Then there are street performances, fire breathers, flute players, and someone who's definitely not allowed to own that many ferrets. Kids chase actors. Vendors shout. Someone starts a poetry slam in the middle of the forum. The poem is about onions. The reviews are mixed. But perhaps the most uniquely Roman form of entertainment is gossip. It's everywhere. Who said what at dinner? Who's been seen sneaking into whose villa? Which senator's wife has mysteriously started wearing a lot of gold? You don't need a theatre when half the population is performing daily scandal in real time. As the day winds down and the crowds disperse, you're left with the unmistakable buzz that only comes from watching strangers hit each other with swords while eating overcooked lentils out of a waxed bowl. In ancient Rome, entertainment isn't just a distraction, it's a lifestyle. It's messy, loud, passionate, and occasionally involves someone dressed as Hercules falling into the orchestra pit. But for a few hours, no matter your status or problems, you're part of something big. You cheer, you laugh, you yell at a horse, and for just a moment, you forget that your apartment ceiling is probably collapsing and your sandals are held together by prayer. And that, my friend, is the Roman way. You're married probably in an arrangement involving goats, gossip, and your mother's disappointment. Love is optional. Status is not. Affairs are common. Dowries are sacred. And arguments often include references to the gods, the laundry, and your spouse's terrible cousin. In ancient Rome, relationships are less about romance and more about property law with a side of emotional negotiation. Marriages are transactions, carefully planned, deals between families designed to consolidate wealth, increase political influence, and, ideally, produce children who don't grow up to be complete disappointments. Your heart? Not part of the contract. Let's start with the ceremony. If you're upper class, your wedding is a full public spectacle, complete with matching tunics, veils the color of fire, and an unfortunate number of animal sacrifices. If you're lower class, it's slightly more chill, just a handshake in front of some friends, maybe some wine, and a neighbor shouting, "Kiss already!" You don't marry for love. You marry for alliances, land, or a solid dowry, usually a hefty bundle of property, silver, slaves, or a vineyard that's only slightly cursed. The due's dowry is sacred. If the marriage ends in divorce, which it often does, you'd better return that dowry or risk a legal dispute that involves at least 3 scrolls and someone yelling, "By Jupiter!" in a courtroom. As a husband, your duties include providing for your wife, maintaining household respectability, and pretending you haven't noticed your neighbor flirting with her through the laundry line. As a wife, your job is to manage the home, bear children, and endure your mother-in-law with the patience of a saint and the wine consumption of Bacchus himself. Speaking of children, oh, there will be pressure. Roman society is obsessed with heirs. If a woman doesn't produce children within a reasonable amount of time, people start whispering about curses, bad omens, or too much fennel. The gods get involved, offerings are made, and if that doesn't work, you get advice from every elderly neighbor who thinks boiled turnips are the answer to fertility. But let's not pretend everyone stays faithful. Roman relationships are flexible. Affairs happen, a lot. Husbands take mistresses. Wives write dramatic poetry about their secret lovers. If you're discreet, no one minds. If you're not discreet, you become gossip column material before you can say he's just a friend. Jealousy exists, but so does resignation. Some households run like political alliances, cold, strategic, and filled with passive-aggressive dinner conversations. Others are more chaotic, with public shouting matches that involve gesturing dramatically with amphorae and passive-aggressively offering burnt bread. Divorce? Totally normal. In fact, so normal that people remarry like it's a competitive sport. Oh, your third husband died of a mysterious illness? How curious. And yet, by next market day, she's wearing a new stola and smiling suspiciously wide. Romans were pragmatic. If a marriage wasn't working, you moved on. Preferably with someone whose familia owned more olive groves. And let's not forget the in-laws. Oh, the in-laws. If your spouse's mother hasn't already moved into your insula, she's definitely visiting every other day with unsolicited advice, a slightly judgmental look, and a basket of olives you didn't ask for. You smile, you nod, you pretend you didn't hear her call you underwhelming in Latin. Of course, not all Roman relationships are traditional. Rome had everything. Arranged marriages, secret affairs, love poetry carved into bathroom walls, and the occasional scandalous partnership that made the Senate sweat. Same-sex relationships, especially among men, were not uncommon, though they came with their own complicated web of social expectations and eyebrow-raising double standards. But for all its dysfunction, Roman love wasn't entirely cynical. There are letters, poems, and graffiti that suggest real affection, devotion, and even the occasional soft moment. A scribbled line on a villa wall reads, "I love her who loves me, and I hate her who doesn't." Rough around the edges, sure but honest. Let's talk fighting. Roman couples fought often, and with flair. Arguments weren't quiet affairs behind closed doors. They were loud, theatrical, and sometimes public. Picture yelling in the forum, flinging figs, and accusing your spouse of being possessed by a minor god of mediocrity. If the neighbors aren't peeking through the curtain, are you even doing it right? And when you're not fighting? You're managing a shared household in a world where half your roof is falling in. The neighbors are melting lead nearby, and the family goat has once again eaten your laundry. These are the bonds that build character, and occasionally ulcers. Still, Roman couples found ways to coexist. They hosted dinner parties, raised children, worshipped their household gods, and navigated the chaotic world of politics, plague, and parsnip shortages. Some even genuinely liked each other. You know, the ones who didn't throw amphorae during arguments and could agree on which senator was the least shady. By the time you're crawling into bed, exhausted, slightly tipsy, and still annoyed that your spouse invited their cousin with the weird laugh over for dinner again, you realize something important. Relationships in ancient Rome were never easy, rarely simple, and always dramatic. But somehow, they made it work. With patience, wit, resilience, and the occasional love spell written on a piece of leather and buried under the neighbor's fig tree. Just another normal night for a Roman couple, with love, laundry, and enough passive aggression to keep the gods entertained. Slavery is everywhere. People are property. Slaves cook, clean, tutor, and sometimes manage entire businesses. Some are treated kindly, many are not. It's a brutal system that underpins Roman society, and it's one of the darker truths behind the empire's golden image. Walk down any Roman street, and you'll see slaves everywhere, pouring wine, carrying water, sweeping floors, tending children, or being barked at by someone who wears too much perfume and not enough shame. They're invisible to some, indispensable to all, and their lives range from barely tolerable to, "Please let Jupiter smite me now." Romans didn't just have slaves, they depended on them. Every grand villa, every city bath, every senator's elaborate dinner party, none of it works without slave labor. Enslaved people were the unpaid engine that made the Roman machine run quietly, efficiently, and entirely against their will. How did people become slaves? Conquest was the biggest contributor. Rome's endless wars meant a constant influx of defeated peoples: Greeks, Gauls, Germans, Carthaginians, all dragged back to the city as spoils. Others were born into slavery, some were sold into it due to debt, and a few were unfortunate victims of piracy, abduction, or just incredibly bad luck at sea. Once enslaved, your fate varied wildly. If you were bought by a wealthy household, you might become a tutor, scribe, or even a personal assistant to someone important. You'd be educated, clothed, and might even get your own tiny room, though let's not romanticize it. You were still property, and your comfort depended entirely on the whims of your owner. Others weren't so lucky. Some slaves worked the latifundia, massive agricultural estates in the countryside. The work was grueling, the conditions awful, and the life expectancy dismal. Picture endless fields, searing heat, brutal overseers, and zero hope of advancement. The only promotion was from alive to not alive. The only break? Rain. In the cities, domestic slaves ran the homes, cleaning, cooking, hauling laundry, and pretending not to hear their masters arguing about inheritance for the fourth time that week. Some were barbers, masseurs, or musicians. Others worked in shops, construction, or temples. Some were prostitutes forced into brothels, often as young as 12, with no protection and no escape. And still, others were forced to entertain. Gladiators, often slaves trained to fight to the death. Chariot racers, also frequently enslaved. If you were strong and unlucky, you might end up in an amphitheater, being cheered by the very society that refuses to see your humanity. Punishments were harsh and creative. You could be whipped, branded, shackled, or worse. If you tried to escape and got caught, you might be forced to wear a metal collar that read, "Hold me, lest I flee." And if you killed your master, the law stated that every slave in the household could be executed in retaliation, even if they didn't lift a finger. Now, not everything was constant misery. Some slaves were trusted advisors. Some managed shops and handled finances. A few earned enough money peculium to eventually buy their freedom. Manumission was a legal path to liberty. And while not common, it did happen. A freed slave became a libertus, a freedman, who gained limited rights and could eventually become a Roman citizen. But freedom didn't mean equality. As a libertus, you were still tied to your former master. You owed them respect, favors, and often a portion of your income. It was more like being on parole with a really clingy ex-boss than true independence. There were slave revolts, of course. The most famous? Spartacus, a gladiator who led a massive uprising of slaves in 73 BCE. For 2 years, they rampaged through Italy, terrifying the Roman elite and briefly giving hope to the oppressed. But Rome doesn't handle hope well. The revolt was crushed. Spartacus was killed. Thousands of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way as a very clear message. Don't try this again. And most didn't. Because escaping was nearly impossible. Because hope was dangerous. Because survival often meant silence. The moral gymnastics of Roman society are astounding. These are people who write eloquent poetry about honor and virtue while owning human beings like cattle. Philosophers like Seneca could give lectures on compassion while instructing their slaves to warm his bath just right or face consequences. Even Cicero, champion of the Republic, casually wrote letters requesting enslaved scribes with neat handwriting and good character. You know, just a cheerful shopping list for people. Slavery was so normalized that many Romans couldn't imagine life without it. And if they could, they didn't want to. It was convenient, it was profitable, and it kept them comfortable. But slaves weren't just silent cogs in the machine. They resisted in small ways, breaking tools, stealing food, faking illness, whispering songs in a language their masters couldn't understand. They formed friendships. They fell in love. They raised children who, if lucky, might one day be free. They endured, quietly, relentlessly. So when you walk through the streets of Rome, remember, every shining marble column, every feast, every robe flapping in the wind, was likely polished, prepared, or stitched by someone who had no choice in the matter. Rome might have called itself the greatest civilization, but it stood on the backs of the unfree, a bitter truth wrapped in togas and triumphal arches. Someone sneezed? That's an omen. The cat crossed your path? Jupiter's angry. Your toast landed upside down? You've offended Pluto. Romans are a superstitious bunch, and your daily life is full of charms, curses, and people muttering Latin spells under their breath during lunch. You might think living in the heart of a mighty empire would come with a sense of control. It does not, because as far as the average Roman is concerned, the world is ruled by gods, ghosts, curses, and chickens. Yes, chickens. We'll get there. Every day begins with a mental checklist. Did you sleep on your right side? Good. Left side? Expect an argument. Did you put your right sandal on first? Excellent. Left foot first? You're going to stub your toe, drop your bread, and probably run into your ex in the forum, wearing a toga that definitely doesn't belong to them. You don't walk under ladders. You don't look directly at a priest who's yawning. You absolutely, under no circumstances, whistle after sunset. That's how you accidentally summon a lava, a malevolent ghost. And while they sound like they should be soft and squishy, they're actually aggressive, whispery apparitions who hold eternal grudges and probably steal your figs. Superstition is everywhere, baked into every corner of Roman life. You've got household gods, lares, and penates to keep happy, which means daily offerings of wine, food, and occasional heartfelt pleas not to let the ceiling fall in again. But that's just home base. Outside, anything can become a sign or a warning. Sneezing is a big deal. If someone sneezes during a conversation, you stop and reevaluate everything you just said. Did you just agree to sell your goat? Better double check. Jupiter might be weighing in. A double sneeze? Possibly a blessing. 3 sneezes in a row? Someone's cursed. Someone always ends up cursed. Animals, of course, are divine messengers. Owls hooting at night mean death is coming. Crows flying to the left? Bad. To the right? Still bad, but slightly more stylish. Dogs howling in the forum? That's never good. And don't even ask what happens when a pig walks backward. It involves goats, a priest, and a very awkward dinner party. Then there's the evil eye, or malocchio. Everyone believes in it, and everyone is terrified of it. It's the idea that someone's envious glare can curse you, cause illness, bad luck, or just make your stew taste like sadness. To ward it off, you wear amulets. Lots of them. Phallic ones, mostly. Because nothing says protection like tiny bronze genitalia hanging around your neck. One popular charm is the fascinum, a winged phallus that dangles from doorways, necks, and even baby cradles. It's supposed to ward off jealousy, misfortune, and wandering eyes. There's nothing like seeing a newborn lovingly swaddled next to a grinning magic dong to remind you how weirdly whimsical Roman superstition can be. Magic and curses are also extremely real in the Roman mind. You might carry a love charm, bury a spell under someone's doorstep, or hire a witch. Yes, witches exist to brew a potion. Don't like your neighbor. Scratch his name into a lead defixio curse tablet, fold it up, and chuck it into a sacred spring. Congratulations! You've just engaged in petty supernatural warfare, and Romans do love a good curse tablet. They've been found all over the empire, often with dramatic flair. May Flavius lose his hair, his goat, and his dignity. Or I curse whoever stole my cloak with eternal itching and shoe blisters. Some even include drawings, just in case the gods need visual aids. Astrology? Absolutely essential. You don't do anything without consulting the stars. Want to get married? Ask the astrologer. Opening a new business? Ask the astrologer. Found a weird rash on your arm? Better check if Mercury is in retrograde and if Saturn is judging you from above. Weddings, births, and even basic errands are guided by omens. The calendar is full of days considered dies nefasti unlucky for official business, marriages, or really anything except sitting very still and trying not to anger fate. You once postponed a hair appointment because a lizard blinked at you weirdly. Wise move. Public events rely on augury, the ancient art of interpreting signs, especially through birds. Official augurs stand in special robes, watching the skies. A single bird flying across the wrong quadrant can delay an entire Senate vote. The sacred chickens? They're fed before battles. If they eat greedily, the gods approve. If not, reschedule your invasion. Even household tasks have their rules. You never sweep at night, it might drive away good spirits. You never spill salt, it offends the goddess Salus. And if your candle goes out suddenly, that's either a ghost or a draft. Either way, you immediately light another one and whisper an apology to Vesta. But here's the thing. Superstition isn't just fear, it's control. In a world where buildings collapse, plagues spread, and the gods are moody at best, rituals give you a sense of power, a charm against curses, a chant to protect your goat, a garlic clove under your pillow to keep nightmares away. It's not science, but it helps you sleep. So tonight, as you step over your threshold with your right foot first, rub your lucky amulet and avoid making eye contact with that weird owl on the roof. Remember, you're not paranoid, you're Roman. And when in Rome, never trust a sneeze. Once the sun sets, Rome gets rowdy. Torches light the way, taverns fill with gossip and wine, and the streets are alive with pickpockets, philosophers, and very loud musicians. You sip watered-down wine and listen to a guy who insists he once met Nero. He didn't. By day, Rome is a city of hustle, trade, law, and laundry. But by night, it transforms into something else entirely. A chaotic blend of glowing torchlight, cheap wine, shouting matches, and questionable decisions. It's loud, it's gritty, it's one broken sandal strap away from becoming a full-on brawl. In other words, it's just another Tuesday. Let's start with the lighting situation. There's no electricity, obviously, and the moon can't be trusted. So the streets are lit by flickering oil lamps and torches that smell like regret and old goat fat. If you're rich, you have a lucerna, a fancy bronze lamp with a smug little flame that barely does its job. If you're poor, you rely on public lamps and the hope that you don't step in something squishy. And then there are the torches carried by slaves, who walk ahead of their masters through the dark, lighting the way, and silently wondering why their employer insists on going to the worst tavern in town for the third night in a row. Speaking of taverns, welcome to the Popina, the Roman version of your local dive bar, minus the sports channel, and with slightly more shouting in Latin. It's small, smoky, and packed with characters straight out of a toga-based sitcom. There's the drunk senator trying to arm wrestle a baker. There's a suspiciously clean man in the corner who claims he's in shipping. And of course, there's that one guy who keeps playing the lyre off-key and asking if anyone wants to hear his epic about cabbage. You sit at a wooden table that wobbles like a philosophy student during finals and order a cup of wine. Not too fancy, not too strong, and definitely watered down. Everyone waters the wine, it's considered uncivilized to drink it pure. Also, pure Roman wine tastes like vinegar with abandonment issues, so you swirl your goblet and sip, pretending it's not just grape juice with a superiority complex. Food in these places is either fantastic or deeply traumatic. You might get lucky with some warm bread, olives, and cheese, or you might end up with whatever the cook found under the cutting board. One time someone ordered the special and was served a sausage that may have once been a shoe. No one asked questions. Taverns are also gossip central. Here's where you hear all the local scandal. Who's sleeping with whom, which merchant got caught smuggling foreign figs, and whether or not that statue of Mars really did fall over because of bad energy. It's a mix of half-truths, wild speculation, and poetic license, but it's entertaining, and nobody ever lets facts get in the way of a good story. Of course, not everyone goes to taverns. The rich throw private dinner parties, complete with reclining couches, hired musicians, and philosophical debates that spiral into wine-fueled arguments about whether love is real or just indigestion. These gatherings can stretch into the early hours, often ending with someone passed out in a decorative fountain and someone else confessing their feelings to a serving platter. For others, nightlife means wandering. Rome's streets are alive with activity. Food vendors still selling hot chickpeas, musicians with flutes and drums playing the same 3 songs, and street performers juggling amphorae and dignity. There are lovers sneaking down alleys, drunks singing out-of-key hymns to Bacchus, and philosophers loudly declaring that the universe is just a fig wrapped in confusion. And, of course, there's danger. The night is when pickpockets thrive, slipping between crowds with expert precision and zero remorse. Bandits might lurk in dark alleys. Muggings are common. So is public urination. Even the poet Juvenal warned against going out after dark unless you had armed bodyguards and the ability to run in sandals. You hear a scuffle nearby. 2 men arguing over who owns the chicken tied to a cart. Neither is sober. The chicken looks deeply embarrassed. You decide to keep walking. You pass a temple where a night vigil is being held. Priests chant, torches flicker, and someone offers a sacrifice that smells a little too much like burnt cabbage. Religion never sleeps in Rome, not when there are omens to watch and gods to appease. You drop a small coin in the offering box just in case and continue down the street. By midnight, the city doesn't sleep. It simmers. Lovers whisper in corners. Drunks nap in doorways. Someone somewhere is reciting poetry to a goat. You see a group of young men reenacting a gladiator battle using brooms and shouting, "Hail, the champion of dirty floors." It's both moving and slightly worrying. Eventually, you wander back home. You dodge a man vomiting into a helmet. You step over a broken lyre. You tiptoe past a sleeping cat that may or may not be a reincarnated senator. Your feet are tired. Your tunic smells like smoke and figs. Your pockets are lighter than when you started, and yet you smile. Because Roman nightlife isn't about perfection. It's about chaos, connection, and the comforting knowledge that, no matter how weird your evening was, someone out there had a weirder one. Welcome to Rome After Dark. Part carnival, part tavern, part soap opera. All unforgettable. Bedtime. You share a room with 3 relatives and a goat. The mattress is stuffed with straw that pokes you in the kidneys. Outside, the city never sleeps. Someone's still shouting about cheese. You try to drift off while clutching your sandals like a pillow. Welcome to the final trial of your Roman day. Trying to get some sleep in a world that was not built with comfort, silence, or personal space in mind. If you thought the forum was loud during the day, wait until you try closing your eyes while your neighbor is hosting a wine-fueled lyre recital 2 floors above you, and someone's having a passive-aggressive marital dispute directly below. Let's start with the bed. Or rather, the general idea of a bed. If you're rich, congratulations. You might have a proper wooden frame with a feather-stuffed mattress and actual linens that don't smell like goat. If you're poor, which, statistically, you are, your sleeping setup consists of a woven straw mat, a scratchy wool blanket, and the eternal hope that tonight's batch of fleas isn't particularly ambitious. There's no real privacy. Roman apartment buildings called insulae are essentially fire traps stacked on top of one another, made with questionable materials and even more questionable architecture. Walls are thin enough that you can hear your upstairs neighbor sneeze, burp, and recite poetry, sometimes all in the same breath. Sound insulation, non-existent. Personal boundaries, hilariously optional. You sleep in one room with your family's siblings, cousins, parents. Occasionally a friend who's just staying for a few days, but never leaves. And sometimes a few animals thrown in for warmth and divided by or companionship. The family goat has claimed your corner of the room again. He's snoring, loudly. The straw mattress pokes you in all the wrong places. No matter how much you shift, there's always one piece that finds the exact spot between 2 ribs and settles in like it's paying rent. You consider removing it, but then remember the last time you tried. The entire mattress exploded like a hay piñata. So now you just accept it. You and the straw are in a long-term relationship built on resentment and resignation. The pillow? That's your sandals wrapped in a spare tunic. Why sandals? Because if you leave them on the floor, someone will trip over them, steal them, or use them as a plate for figs. Plus, they're warm. They're yours, and they smell just familiar enough to be comforting in a deeply confusing way. Outside, the city hums with after-hours life. There's someone selling hot chickpeas in the street, clanging a pot to get attention. Someone else is arguing loudly about whether the moon is a god or just a really shiny cloud. A group of drunk young men are trying to climb a statue of Mars and declare themselves emperors of the night. Again. And then there's the smell. Night doesn't erase Rome's complex bouquet, it just shifts it. The smoke from cooking fires mixes with the scent of chamber pots being emptied into the alley. You catch a whiff of fish, wine, and something unidentifiable that makes your eyes water. You're not sure if it's cheese or regret. You finally start to drift off, lulled by the rhythmic squeak of your uncle's snoring and the soft chewing sounds of the goat enjoying a late-night snack of someone's sandals, possibly yours. Then suddenly a scream, not of danger, of enthusiasm. It's your neighbor. He's composing a love poem, out loud, with full dramatic pauses and an audience of extremely unamused pigeons. He ends the verse by blowing a kiss to the moon and accidentally knocking over a chamber pot. You decide not to ask questions. You try to turn over. The floor creaks. The straw rustles. The goat farts. Your sibling kicks you in their sleep. You try the other side. Nope. That one has a straw spike shaped like the Senate. You sigh, pull the blanket over your head, and hope no one sets the building on fire this week. Because yes, insulae have a tendency to collapse or catch fire. A candle knocked over, a cooking brazier left unattended, the guy downstairs who insists on lighting incense with a torch. Fires were so common that people developed a sixth sense for smelling smoke in their sleep. If it smells like figs, you're fine. If it smells like burning wool, get up, fast. But somehow, despite the chaos, the noise, the scratchy wool, the goat drama, and the existential threat of spontaneous combustion, you manage to fall asleep. Maybe it's the rhythm of the city. Maybe it's the fatigue from hauling amphorae all day. Maybe it's just the human body giving up out of sheer necessity. You dream of something oddly peaceful. A quiet field, a warm breeze, no chamber pots, no poetry, just silence. Then a rooster crows. At least, you think it's a rooster. Could be a drunk merchant. Either way, it's morning. Your day starts again. You roll over, stretch, and find a piece of straw in your ear. The goat is now on your legs. Your cousin is mumbling in their sleep about olives, and your neighbor is practicing another poem. Welcome back. Another night survived in the city that never sleeps. And somehow, neither do you. Fires, floods, plagues. Rome's got it all. Your building could collapse, the Tiber could overflow, or a temple could fall on your cousin during a sermon. Life is unpredictable. You learn to keep your belongings in a sack you can grab quickly, just in case. Rome may be the beating heart of the ancient world, but that heart beats with the constant threat of spontaneous catastrophe. Think of it as living inside a beautiful but unstable cake, ornate on the outside, structurally terrifying underneath. If it's not a fire, it's a flood. If it's not a flood, it's a plague. And if it's not a plague, well, there's always a runaway cart or an angry deity with a point to prove. Let's begin with fire, the unofficial mascot of Roman disaster. Your charming little insula, the apartment you share with 5 relatives, 3 chickens, and a goat is made of timber, plaster, and hope. Add open flames from oil lamps, cooking braziers, and one guy who insists on incense for his morning prayers, and you've got the fire safety rating of a paper towel. Fire spreads fast. 1 minute you're asleep, dreaming of fresh figs and not stepping in sewage, and the next, you're sprinting barefoot through smoke while someone screams, "Save the amphorae," from a 3rd-floor window. You grab your emergency sack, which contains 1 tunic, a dried fig, and your best spoon and run. It's not much, but it's all you've got. To make things worse, fire brigades are mostly privatized, and sometimes arrive late because they're negotiating a payment first. Yes, that's right, while your neighbor's roof is actively on fire, a group of men in tunics are haggling over how many sesterces it's worth to lift a bucket. Efficient? No. Very Roman? Absolutely. Then there's flooding, because the Tiber River is basically the moody ex-boyfriend of Roman geography, sometimes calm, sometimes devastating, and always inconvenient. When it rains heavily, which it does with an alarming sense of timing, the Tiber swells like it's had too much garum, and suddenly your street becomes a canal. Water pours into basements, shops float away, and if you live on the ground floor, congratulations, you now own a public bath. People wade through knee-deep water, clutching chickens and heirlooms. You try to stay dry by standing on amphorae while your neighbor rows past in a stolen cart shouting, "Who needs olives?" Of course, all of this soggy chaos feeds nicely into disease, which thrives in a city that runs on public toilets, questionable street meat, and the concept of clean enough. Plagues aren't just events, they're characters. They show up uninvited, overstay their welcome, and take everyone's lunch. The Antonine Plague, the Cyprian Plague, these aren't just historical footnotes. These are year-long RSVP-only disasters that arrive with fever, boils, and the vague sense that the gods are deeply displeased. Doctors Medici do their best. Their best includes garlic, wine, bleeding, and occasionally waving a chicken over your body while chanting. Meanwhile, you burn incense, wear amulets, and pray to every deity from Apollo to that weird local river spirit with a fishtail and excellent cheekbones. Then there's building collapses. Because again, these insulae are not architectural masterpieces. They're tall, narrow, and built like a toddler's block tower after 3 cups of grape juice. You'll be lying in bed, counting ceiling cracks like stars, when the structure groans like an old senator and decides, you know what? Gravity is optional. One morning you wake up to find the building next door simply gone. Just a pile of tiles, dust, and one man still clutching his breakfast bowl like nothing happened. Romans have a remarkable ability to shrug off structural disaster. It's impressive and slightly alarming. And then we have earthquakes, which are nature's way of stirring the pot. Not as frequent as fires or floods, but when they hit, they really go for drama. Temples crack, statues fall. People immediately assume the gods are mad, and suddenly there's a rush on sacrificial goats. You can't find a decent lamb for days. And if that's not enough, there are random disasters, runaway carts, sewer explosions, collapsed aqueducts, even rogue animals from the arena. Yes, one day you might simply be walking home when a half-blind lion escapes its cage and takes a casual stroll through the forum. Everyone scatters. One man offers it grapes. The lion is not impressed. Even celestial events spark panic. A solar eclipse? The sun has abandoned us. A comet? Doom is near. A red moon? Definitely witchcraft. You stand outside with half your neighborhood, all holding up hands and hoping it's not an omen. Spoiler, it's always an omen. So how do Romans cope? Simple. Preparation and superstition. You keep your belongings in a sack near the door. You bribe the household gods with extra wine. You step over the threshold with your right foot. You learn to live with uncertainty, dodge flying chamber pots, and accept that today might be the day the roof falls in and tomorrow might be worse. Because life in Rome is glorious, ridiculous, and constantly one sneeze away from divine retribution. And yet, you adapt. You joke. You gossip about which senator's villa flooded again. You rebuild. You survive. Because you're Roman. And random doom is just part of the schedule. The sun rises. The roosters scream. You stretch your sore limbs, ignore the creaking walls, and get ready to live another gloriously gritty Roman day. It's hard, it's loud, and it smells weird. But hey, you're part of the greatest empire in the world. For now, your eyes flutter open to a ray of sunlight sneaking through a crack in the wall that wasn't there yesterday. You lie still for a moment, wondering if you actually slept or just closed your eyes and temporarily escaped the existential threat of goat-induced insomnia. The mattress still straw, still mildly aggressive whispers that it's time to get up by stabbing you in the hip again. Around you, the insula groans. Somewhere upstairs, someone drops something heavy. It could be a jug of water. It could be the entire ceiling. You don't flinch anymore. At this point, it would be more surprising if the roof didn't make strange noises in the morning. Your cousin is snoring. The goat is chewing something that used to belong to your sandal. You reach for your tunic and wriggle into it with the same enthusiasm as one might muster for taxes or dental work. It smells like yesterday, because that's exactly what it is. Laundry day isn't until next Saturn's day, and even then, you're not the one scrubbing tunics with fermented urine. You shuffle across the room to splash some water on your face from the communal basin, lukewarm, slightly gritty, and scented with essence of whoever got here first. You try not to think about it. A quick pat dry with a cloth that was white 2 years ago, and you're officially freshened up, Roman style. Outside your window, the city is already wide awake. Merchants are setting up their stalls. Kids are chasing chickens that have no idea how important they are to lunch. And somewhere down the street, a man is yelling about figs like they owe him money. The sounds of Rome waking up are less of a gentle orchestra and more of a chaotic marching band with a goat for a conductor. Breakfast time. You nibble on the heel of yesterday's bread, now more of a weapon than a meal, and chase it with a few sad olives and some lukewarm bean mush. The rat that lives near the cupboard watches judgmentally. You ignore him. You've had your dignity insulted by worse today, and it's only sunrise. You step outside, bracing yourself for the smells of the street. A swirling cocktail of fish, smoke, sweat, animal droppings, and ambition. A nearby latrine is doing its best to introduce a sixth sense. You wrap your cloak a little tighter and remind yourself that this is the price of empire. Your day unfolds with a familiar rhythm. Work, gossip, errands, and avoiding roof tiles falling from above. Maybe you clean clothes. Maybe you carve marble. Maybe you try to sell spoons no one needs. Maybe you're back at the forum, pretending to understand what the guy shouting about taxes is talking about while secretly scanning the crowd for someone dropping a coin. Lunch is something modest bread again. Maybe some cheese or lentils if fortune favors you. You eat quickly, perched on a crate, surrounded by the sounds of haggling, hammering, and at least one man trying to teach his donkey Latin. It's not going well. By afternoon, the sun turns Rome into a slow cooker. You're sweating. Everyone is sweating. Even statues look like they want to sit in the shade. If you're lucky, you sneak away for a brief midday nap. But more likely, you're stuck squinting into the sun while a senator's cousin yells at you for not bowing dramatically enough when he walked past. As evening approaches, the city softens just a bit. Taverns open, the streets fill with music, and someone's already 2 goblets deep into their nightly wine-induced epiphany. You might stop for a bite, trade news about the latest flood, or witness a heated argument between a street preacher and a fishmonger. Either way, you're part of the nightly theatre that is Rome at dusk. Eventually, you make your way back to your insula. The staircase is crooked, the hallway is dim, and you swear the goat has learned how to open the door. Your family greets you with the usual complaints, updates, and loud opinions about the neighbor's cooking. You smile, nod, and collapse onto your straw-stuffed nemesis with a groan. Outside, the city begins to sleep. Well, sleep is a generous word. It hums, it murmurs, it flirts with rest while clinging to one last story, one last song, one last drink. You hear someone whispering a prayer to the household gods. You hear a pot clatter. You hear your neighbor rehearsing yet another poem about his ex-wife. And through it all, you breathe. Because despite the chaos, despite the lack of privacy, the fleas, the fire risk, the goat, and the constant threat of plague, you made it. Another day in Rome. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it all again. And somehow, that's okay. So tonight, as you drift off in your quiet room, wrapped in soft blankets with clean socks and indoor plumbing, take a moment to feel grateful that you weren't born in a 4th-floor Roman fire trap, sleeping on straw that's 60% dust and 40% fleas. Because daily life in ancient Rome, it was loud, it was filthy, it was overcrowded, overheated, and overwhelmingly pungent. You worked hard, ate lentils cold, bathed with strangers, and went to the bathroom in full view of your neighbors. And somehow, you survived it all with a sandal full of blisters and a belly full of beans. Sure, the Romans had aqueducts, concrete, and a surprisingly detailed understanding of how to throw a dinner party. But they also had to dodge collapsing buildings, rabid street dogs, and wine that could double as paint remover. And yet, they laughed. They loved. They watched ridiculous plays, argued about philosophy, and invented sarcasm at levels still unmatched today. They kept going, one fish sauce scented step at a time. So, as you gently fade into sleep, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors, the ones who lived through that chaos with their striggles and their suspicious sausages, because they made it through just long enough to get you here, in your soft bed, with your electric fan, and absolutely no risk of being crushed by an amphora full of anchovies. History might be weird, gross, and kind of exhausting, but it's also human, and hilarious, and weirdly inspiring. Sleep well, my time-traveling friend. You've survived ancient Rome. You deserve a nap.